I promised I'd come back. Emma Brooks froze mid-sentence, chalk still pressed against the board. 20 children staring as a scarred stranger placed a tiny wooden whistle on her desk. Her hands trembled. 20 years of silence. 20 years of refusing every man who asked for her hand. And now the boy she buried in memory stood breathing in front of her, older, harder, and somehow still the same. Before we go any further, hit that subscribe button and drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's go back to where this promise began. The chalk snapped in Emma's fingers before she even understood why. It wasn't the whistle. It wasn't even his face, weathered and scarred by 20 years of sun and hardship. It was his voice. That same low, steady voice, older now, rougher, but carrying the exact cadence of a 10-year-old boy standing beside a wagon with tears in his eyes. I promised I'd come back. The children in her classroom went silent, sensing something enormous had just walked through the door, though none of them understood what. Little Thomas Riley, only 7, tugged at her skirt. "Miss Brooks, are you all right?" Emma didn't answer. She couldn't. Her eyes were locked on the whistle sitting on her desk, chipped and faded, the exact one she had carved with her own hands when she was 10 years old, sitting beside the river with a boy who was about to disappear from her life. "Class dismissed." She finally managed, her voice cracking on the last word. "Go on home now, all of you." The children shuffled out, whispering to each other, glancing back at the stranger who filled the doorway of the schoolhouse like he belonged there, like 20 years hadn't passed at all. When the last child vanished down the dirt road, Emma finally allowed herself to look at him directly. Samuel Carter. He was taller than she remembered, broader through the shoulders, his jaw carrying a thin scar that hadn't been there when he was a boy. His hat was pushed back just enough that she could see his eyes, and those hadn't changed at all. Still that same deep brown, still holding that same quiet intensity that used to make her feel like she was the only person in the world worth looking at. "Samuel," she whispered, testing the name on her tongue like she wasn't sure it was real. "Samuel Carter." "Emma." His voice caught slightly. "You look—" "Don't." She held up a hand, though she wasn't sure if she was stopping him or stopping herself from crying. "Don't you dare stand there and tell me how I look after 20 years of nothing. 20 years, Samuel. Not a letter, not a word, nothing." His jaw tightened, and for a moment she saw something flash across his face, something that looked like shame mixed with old pain. "I know," he said quietly. "I know what I owe you an explanation for." "An explanation?" Emma laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think I need an explanation? I needed you to come back, Samuel. I needed a letter telling me you were alive. I needed something, anything, to tell me that boy who carved his initials into that tree wasn't just lying to a child to make leaving easier." "I wasn't lying." His voice hardened with conviction. "Every word I said to you that day was true." "Then where were you?" Her voice rose, years of buried hurt suddenly surfacing all at once. "Where were you when my father died? Where were you when this town needed a teacher and I had nothing but myself to build a life with? Where were you every single night? I looked out my window and wondered if you were even still breathing." Samuel took a step closer, and she instinctively stepped back, bumping into her desk. "I was surviving," he said, his voice raw. "I was working land that near killed me. I was burying men I called friends. I was building something with my own 2 hands because I refused to come back here as nothing. I refused to come back and ask you to choose me when I had nothing to offer but empty promises." "I never needed you to offer me anything." Emma's voice cracked. "I needed you to come back, Samuel. That's all. Just you." The silence between them stretched painfully long. Outside, a wagon rattled past, and somewhere a dog barked, but inside that small schoolhouse, the world had narrowed down to 2 people staring at 20 years of separation. Neither of them had chosen. "I have something to tell you," Samuel finally said, reaching into his coat pocket. "Something I should have told you the day I left." Emma's chest tightened. "What?" Before he could answer, the schoolhouse door banged open, and Reverend Whitfield stepped inside, his face pale with urgency. "Emma, thank God I found you. There's trouble at the Hendricks Ranch. Fire's spreading through their east pasture, and half the town's already there trying to fight it back." Emma's eyes darted between Samuel and the Reverend, torn between the conversation she desperately needed to finish and the emergency unfolding outside. "Go," Samuel said quietly, though his eyes told her he hadn't wanted to say it. "This isn't finished, Emma. But go. People need you more than I do right now." She hesitated for only a moment before grabbing her shawl and rushing out the door, Samuel following close behind, despite having just ridden into town on an exhausted horse. The scene at the Hendricks Ranch was chaos. Flames licked across dry grass, threatening to consume not just pasture land, but the barn itself, where several horses were trapped and screaming in terror. Men were forming a bucket line from the well, but the fire was spreading faster than they could contain it. "The horses!" Sarah Hendricks screamed, pointing toward the burning barn. "My husband's still trying to get them out." Samuel didn't hesitate. He tore off toward the barn, ignoring the shouts warning him back, disappearing into smoke thick enough to swallow a man whole. "Samuel!" Emma's scream tore from her throat before she even realized she was moving toward the fire herself. "Emma, no!" Reverend Whitfield grabbed her arm, holding her back. "You can't go in there!" Seconds stretched into unbearable minutes. The barn's roof groaned, threatening collapse, and smoke billowed thicker with each passing moment. Emma's heart pounded so violently she thought it might stop entirely. Then through the smoke, a figure emerged. Samuel coughing violently, leading two terrified horses by their reins, with a barely conscious Jacob Hendricks slung over his shoulder. "Get him water!" Samuel shouted, collapsing to his knees the moment he was clear of the smoke, laying Jacob down gently, despite his own exhaustion. Emma rushed forward, dropping to her knees beside them both, checking Jacob's breathing before turning to Samuel, whose face was streaked black with soot, his eyes red and watering. "You could have died," she whispered, her hands trembling as she reached for his face. "Wouldn't have been the first time I risked my life for something worth saving." He rasped, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that stole the breath from her lungs. The moment was interrupted by Sarah Hendricks sobbing with relief over her husband and the townspeople rushing forward with water and blankets. But something had shifted in that instant between Emma and Samuel, something neither of them could deny any longer. Later that evening, once the fire was extinguished, and Jacob Hendricks was resting comfortably with his family, Emma found Samuel sitting alone near the town well, staring up at the stars like he was searching for answers written across the sky. "You never finished telling me," she said, settling beside him despite every instinct telling her to keep her distance. "What did you want to say to me?" Samuel was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as though wrestling with words too heavy to speak easily. "I built a ranch," he finally said. "A good one. Up in Wyoming near the mountains. Took me damn near 15 years of blood and sweat, but I built something real, something I could be proud of." "That's not what you were going to tell me," Emma said softly. "I can hear it in your voice." He turned to look at her then, and the raw vulnerability in his expression nearly broke her heart all over again. "I never married," he said quietly. "Never even courted anyone seriously. Every single night for 20 years I fell asleep thinking about a girl with chalk dust on her fingers, teaching children how to read." Emma's breath caught. "Samuel, I know it's not fair of me to say that," he continued before she could respond. "I know I have no right to walk back into your life after 20 years and expect anything from you. But I needed you to know the truth. I never stopped loving you, Emma, not for one single day." Tears welled in Emma's eyes, and she found herself unable to speak, the weight of 2 decades of loneliness crashing down all at once. "Why now?" she finally whispered. "Why come back now after everything?" "Because I finally have something worth offering you," Samuel said. "Because I'm no longer that broke, desperate boy climbing into a wagon with nothing but promises. I have land, cattle, a home. I have everything I need except the one thing that actually matters." "And what's that?" "You," he said simply. "Just you." Emma stood abruptly, putting distance between them, her emotions a violent storm she couldn't quite control. "You can't just say things like that," she said, her voice shaking. You can't just ride into town after 20 years and expect me to fall into your arms like nothing happened." "I'm not expecting anything," Samuel said, rising to face her. "I'm asking Emma. Just asking for a chance to prove that promise still means something." Before Emma could respond, hurried footsteps approached, and young Tommy Riley came running up breathless and wide-eyed. "Miss Brooks! Miss Brooks, come quick. There's a man at the saloon asking questions about you, and Mr. Hendricks says he's trouble." Emma's stomach twisted with dread. "What kind of questions?" "He's asking about the schoolhouse," Tommy said. "And about some fella named Samuel Carter." Samuel's expression darkened instantly, his easy vulnerability replaced by something sharper, more guarded. "Describe him." Samuel said, his voice suddenly commanding in a way that startled Emma. "Tall man," Tommy said. "Fancy suit, gold pocket watch. Talks real smooth like he's used to people listening." Samuel's jaw clenched, and Emma noticed his hand instinctively drift toward his hip, though he wasn't wearing a gun belt. "Victor Ashford," he muttered under his breath. "You know him?" Emma asked, alarm creeping into her voice. "I know of him," Samuel said grimly. "And if he's already asking questions about me in this town, that means trouble followed me here whether I wanted it to or not." Emma felt a chill run through her despite the warm evening air. 20 years of waiting, and the moment Samuel finally returned danger seemed to arrive right alongside him. "What kind of trouble?" she asked, though something in her gut told her she wasn't going to like the answer. Samuel's eyes met hers, heavy with unspoken history. "The kind that could destroy everything I've spent 20 years building," he said quietly, "and possibly everyone in this town along with it." The following morning, Emma arrived at the schoolhouse earlier than usual, unable to sleep after the events of the previous night. Her mind raced with questions about Samuel, about Victor Ashford, about the strange sense of danger that had settled over Pine Hollow like a storm cloud refusing to break. She was surprised to find Samuel already there, sitting on the schoolhouse steps, looking like he hadn't slept either. "You're up early," she said, approaching cautiously. "Didn't sleep much," he admitted. "Too much on my mind." "Tell me about Victor Ashford," Emma said, sitting beside him, despite her earlier resolve to keep her distance. "Really tell me. Not just enough to worry me, but everything." Samuel sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. "Victor Ashford is a land developer," he said. "Works with railroad investors buying up territory ahead of new rail lines being built. He's ruthless, Emma. I've seen what happens to towns that stand in his way." "What does he want with you?" "Years back I got tangled up in something I'm not proud of," Samuel said quietly. "A gunfight. Self-defense, but it ended with a man dead, and men like Ashford, they know how to twist a story like that into something ugly if it serves their purposes." Emma's heart sank. "You think he means to hurt you? Or hurt this town?" "I think Victor Ashford doesn't care who gets hurt as long as he gets what he wants," Samuel said grimly. "And if he's already sniffing around Pine Hollow, that means he's got his eyes set on this land." Before Emma could respond, the sound of an approaching carriage caught their attention. A fine polished carriage pulled by two immaculate horses rolled into view, drawing curious stares from townspeople going about their morning business. The carriage stopped directly in front of the schoolhouse, and a well-dressed man stepped out, his suit tailored perfectly, his smile polished to an unsettling degree. "Samuel Carter," the man said smoothly, his eyes glinting with something predatory. "I must say you're a difficult man to track down. Took my associates weeks to trace you all the way out here." Samuel rose slowly, positioning himself slightly in front of Emma, without seeming to think about it. "Ashford," he said coldly. "What do you want?" Victor's smile widened, though it never reached his eyes. "Just a friendly conversation," he said, "between old business acquaintances. And—" His gaze shifted to Emma, lingering just a moment too long. "Perhaps an introduction to this lovely schoolteacher I've heard so much about?" "Leave her out of this," Samuel growled, his voice carrying a warning edge Emma had never heard from him before. "Oh, I intend to keep things entirely civil," Victor said, his tone deceptively pleasant. I'm simply here to discuss some very profitable opportunities with the good people of Pine Hollow. Railroad expansion, you understand. Progress waits for no one. This town isn't interested in selling, Samuel said flatly. Victor's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before returning sharper, now more calculated. That's a rather bold statement to make on behalf of an entire town, Mr. Carter, he said, especially considering you don't actually live here. I know these people, Samuel replied, and I know men like you. You don't bring progress, Ashford. You bring ruin dressed up in fine suits and empty promises. The tension between the two men crackled like electricity, and Emma found herself holding her breath, sensing the danger radiating from this confrontation. We'll see about that, Victor said finally, his eyes flicking toward Emma once more. Miss Brooks, was it? I do hope we'll have the opportunity to speak further. I have a proposition that I believe you'll find quite interesting. Without waiting for a response, Victor turned and climbed back into his carriage, disappearing down the road as smoothly as he had arrived. Emma released the breath she'd been holding, turning to Samuel with wide eyes. What did he mean by that a proposition? Samuel's expression was grim. I don't know, but whatever it is, you can be certain it's designed to serve his purposes, not yours. Samuel, Emma said slowly, what exactly happened between you and Victor Ashford? The real story, not just pieces of it. Samuel was silent for a long moment, staring down the empty road where the carriage had disappeared. 3 years ago, he finally said, Ashford tried buying out ranchers near my property in Wyoming. Men who refused to sell started having accidents, fires, poisoned wells, cattle turning up dead. Emma's blood ran cold. You think he was responsible? I know he was, Samuel said. I couldn't prove it, not enough to bring charges, but I knew. And when he came after my land directly, I refused to back down. What happened? His men jumped me one night. Samuel said, his voice tightening with old anger. Tried to make an example of me. I defended myself. One of his hired guns ended up dead, and Ashford made sure the story that spread painted me as some violent outlaw who murdered an innocent man in cold blood. That's a lie. Truth doesn't matter to men like Ashford, Samuel said bitterly. Only the story that serves his interests. And now he's found me again, which means he's got his sights set on Pine Hollow. Emma's mind raced, piecing together the implications. The railroad expansion. He wants this land for the rail lines. That would be my guess, Samuel confirmed. And if he's willing to burn ranches and poison wells to get what he wants in Wyoming, there's no telling what he's capable of here. A cold dread settled over Emma as she considered the danger now threatening not just Samuel, but the entire town she had called home for 20 years. We have to warn people, she said urgently. The town needs to know what kind of man they're dealing with. They won't believe it, Samuel said. Not from me anyway. I'm a stranger who just rode into town with rumors of violence attached to my name. Ashford will make certain of that. Then we'll find proof, Emma said, firmly, surprising herself with the determination in her own voice. We'll show this town exactly who Victor Ashford really is. Samuel looked at her with something like wonder mixed with concern. Emma, this isn't your fight. You made it my fight the moment you rode back into my life, she said. Besides, this is my home, Samuel. I won't stand by and let some ruthless businessman destroy everything the people here have built, not while I have breath in my body to stop him. For the first time since his return, Samuel smiled, though it was tinged with worry. There's the girl I remember, he said softly, fierce as ever. Their moment was interrupted by the sound of raised voices from the direction of the general store. Emma and Samuel exchanged glances before hurrying toward the commotion, finding a small crowd gathered outside, listening intently to a man Emma recognized as one of Victor Ashford's associates, addressing them with practiced charm. Unprecedented opportunity for prosperity, the man was saying. Fair prices for your land, guaranteed employment with the railroad, and modernization that will bring Pine Hollow into a new era of progress. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some skeptical, others clearly intrigued by promises of easy money and modern conveniences. Don't listen to him, Samuel called out, stepping forward, despite the risk of drawing unwanted attention to himself. Ashford's promises come with a price you don't want to pay. The associate's eyes narrowed as he recognized Samuel. Ah, Mr. Carter. I see you've already begun spreading your particular brand of poison in this town. I'm telling the truth, Samuel said firmly. Ask him what happened to ranchers in Wyoming who refused his offers. Ask him about the fires, the poisoned wells, the accidents that weren't accidents at all. The crowd's murmurs turned uneasy glances, shifting between Samuel and the associate. Baseless accusations from a man with a violent history of his own, the associate said smoothly, though Emma noticed a flicker of nervousness in his eyes. Mr. Carter here has quite the reputation for gunfights and bloodshed. That's a lie. Emma stepped forward before she could stop herself. Samuel Carter is a good man, and I won't stand here and listen to slander against him. The crowd's attention shifted to Emma, surprise evident on several faces at her sudden defense of the stranger. Miss Brooks. The associate said, his tone carefully measured. I understand loyalty runs deep, especially for old acquaintances, but perhaps you should consider the facts before defending a man capable of such violence. The only facts I need, Emma said, her voice steady, despite her racing heart, are that Samuel Carter risked his own life last night to save Jacob Hendricks from a burning barn. That's the kind of man he is, not the twisted story your employer wants to spread. Whispers spread through the crowd as people recalled the fire, several nodding in agreement as they remembered Samuel's heroic actions. The associate's composure cracked slightly, clearly not having anticipated this turn of events. Regardless of recent actions, the offer from Mr. Ashford remains generous and beneficial for this entire community. I suggest you all consider it carefully, rather than allowing personal biases to cloud your judgment. With that, he retreated, though the seeds of doubt he'd planted lingered visibly among some townspeople. That's not the end of it, Samuel said quietly to Emma once the crowd began dispersing. Ashford won't give up this easily. Then we won't either, Emma replied determinedly. As the day wore on, word spread through Pine Hollow about the confrontation. Opinions divided between those who trusted Samuel's warnings and those tempted by Ashford's promises of prosperity. Emma found herself fielding questions from worried neighbors and friends throughout the afternoon, doing her best to explain the danger without fully understanding it herself. That evening, as she finally locked up the schoolhouse, exhausted from the day's events, she found Samuel waiting for her once again, though his expression was heavier than before. What's wrong? She asked immediately, recognizing the tension in his shoulders. Received a message from an old friend up in Wyoming, Samuel said grimly. Ashford's already sent men to intimidate ranchers who refused his initial offers, setting fires, poisoning water sources, the same tactics he used before. That's horrible, Emma whispered, though she wasn't entirely surprised, given what Samuel had already told her. It gets worse, Samuel continued. My friend mentioned that Ashford's men have been asking questions about my ranch too. Seems like he's planning retaliation for me interfering with his plans here. Fear gripped Emma's heart. Samuel, if he's willing to destroy your ranch out of spite? I know, Samuel said quietly. Which is why I need to head back to Wyoming as soon as possible, at least temporarily, to secure my property and warn my neighbors. Emma's chest tightened with a mixture of fear and something else, something that felt disturbingly like the same devastating loss she'd experienced 20 years ago. You're leaving again, she said softly, unable to keep the hurt from her voice. Samuel's eyes softened as he reached for her hands. Not forever, Emma. I promise you this isn't like before. I'll come back, and this time I intend to stay. How can I trust that promise? She asked, old wounds resurfacing painfully. How can I trust any promise from you after everything? Because this time, Samuel said firmly, I'm not leaving to build something for myself. I'm leaving to protect what I've already found, what I never thought I'd have a second chance at. Emma searched his eyes, finding nothing but sincerity and quiet determination staring back at her. When do you leave? She finally asked. Tomorrow morning, Samuel said. But Emma, before I go, I need you to promise me something. What? Don't trust Ashford, Samuel said seriously. Whatever proposition he offers you, whatever promises he makes, don't trust a single word. Men like him don't offer opportunities without expecting something devastating in return. Emma nodded solemnly, though a knot of anxiety tightened in her stomach at the thought of facing Victor Ashford alone while Samuel was away. "Promise me you'll be careful," she said. "Whatever's waiting for you in Wyoming, promise me you'll come back safely." Samuel pulled her into an embrace, the first physical contact they'd shared since his return, and Emma felt 20 years of loneliness and longing crash into a single, overwhelming moment of connection. "I promise," he whispered against her hair. "I've already broken one promise to you, Emma. I refuse to break another." As they stood together in the fading evening light, neither of them noticed the figure watching from a distance, hidden in the shadows near the general store. Victor Ashford's cold eyes, calculating his next move, with the patience of a man who never lost, no matter the cost to those who stood in his way. The following morning arrived far too quickly for Emma's liking. She stood outside the schoolhouse watching Samuel prepare his horse for the journey back to Wyoming, her heart heavy with the fear that history might repeat itself despite his promises. "You'll write to me?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Actual letters this time, not 20 years of silence." Samuel paused his preparations, turning to face her with an expression of fierce determination. "Every single week," he promised. "And Emma, I mean it this time. This isn't goodbye. This is just temporary distance while I handle this threat." "How long?" "A few weeks, maybe a month," he said. "Long enough to secure my property, warn my neighbors, and gather what evidence I can against Ashford's tactics. Then I'm coming straight back here to you." Emma nodded, though uncertainty gnawed at her despite his reassurances. 20 years of loneliness had taught her caution even against the desperate hope blooming in her chest. "Be careful," she said again. "Please, Samuel." He reached out gently, cupping her face in his weathered hands. "I finally found my way back to you after 20 years, Emma Brooks. I don't intend to let anything, especially not a man like Victor Ashford, take that away from me now." Before she could respond, he leaned down and kissed her soft and full of unspoken promises. 20 years of longing, finally finding its answer in that single tender moment. When they finally parted, Emma's eyes were bright with unshed tears, though a small, hopeful smile touched her lips for the first time since Samuel's return. "Go," she whispered. "Handle your business in Wyoming. But Samuel Carter, if you break this promise—" "I won't," he said firmly, mounting his horse. "I swear it on everything I hold dear." As Samuel rode out of Pine Hollow, disappearing down the same road he'd traveled 20 years earlier, as a heartbroken boy, Emma stood watching until he vanished from sight. Her heart caught between fragile hope and the crushing weight of old fears. She had no way of knowing that within days Victor Ashford would make his move not against Samuel directly, but against her, offering a proposition designed to tear apart everything she had rebuilt her life around: testing loyalty, love, and the true meaning of the promise made beneath an old cottonwood tree 20 years before. The battle for Pine Hollow and for Emma's heart had only just begun. Emma didn't sleep that night. She lay awake, counting the hours since Samuel's horse disappeared down the road, replaying his kiss, his promise, the fierce look in his eyes when he told her he wouldn't break another vow to her. By morning, exhaustion had carved dark circles beneath her eyes, but she rose anyway, dressed and walked to the schoolhouse because 20 children still needed their lessons regardless of what her heart was doing. She barely made it through the front door before Sarah Hendricks came rushing up the path, breathless, her apron still dusted with flour. "Emma, thank heaven I caught you before class started." "Sarah, what's wrong?" "It's Victor Ashford," Sarah said, glancing over her shoulder, as though the man himself might be listening. "He's asking around town for you specifically. Said he has business to discuss something about an opportunity too important to wait." Emma's stomach dropped. Samuel had only been gone 1 day, and already Ashford was circling. "Did he say what kind of opportunity?" "No, but Emma," Sarah lowered her voice. "He's not just asking politely. He's telling people you'd be a fool not to hear him out. Says it concerns your future, your whole future. Emma forced her voice steady, even as dread coiled tight in her chest. Then I suppose I'll have to hear him out. Be careful, Sarah warned. Jacob still can't stop talking about what that man's associate said yesterday, twisting Samuel's good deed into something ugly. Ashford's the kind of man who smiles while he's cutting your throat. Emma nodded, tucking the warning away as she stepped inside to begin the school day. Though her mind remained fixed on the confrontation she knew was coming, it arrived faster than she expected. By midday, as she released the children for their lunch recess, a shadow fell across the schoolhouse doorway. Victor Ashford stood there in another immaculate suit, his smile polished and practiced, a leather portfolio tucked under one arm. "Miss Brooks," he said smoothly, "I do hope I'm not interrupting." "You are," Emma said flatly, "but I imagine that won't stop you." Victor chuckled, stepping inside uninvited. "Sharp tongue. I admire that in a woman. Refreshing compared to the simpering I usually encounter. What do you want, Mr. Ashford?" He set the portfolio on her desk, opening it to reveal official-looking documents embossed with gold lettering. "I represent the Continental Northern Railroad along with several prominent investors who've taken a keen interest in expanding education infrastructure alongside our rail development." "Get to the point." "The point," Victor said, his smile widening, "is that I've been made aware of your considerable talents as an educator. 20 years teaching in this dusty little schoolhouse, molding young minds with barely 2 dimes to rub together for supplies. It's admirable truly, but also, if I may be so bold, a tremendous waste." Emma crossed her arms. "A waste? The Ashworth Academy," Victor said, tapping the documents. "One of the most prestigious educational institutions in Chicago. They're seeking a new principal, someone with vision, discipline, and a proven record of excellence. I've recommended you personally." Emma blinked, genuinely caught off guard. "Me, you," Victor confirmed. "Full salary befitting your talents. A residence-provided resources you could never dream of accessing out here in this forgotten corner of the territory. Libraries. Laboratories. The opportunity to shape the minds of the nation's future leaders rather than farmers' children who'll likely never leave this valley." Something about his phrasing made Emma's skin crawl. "These children deserve just as much as any child in Chicago." "Of course," Victor said smoothly, though his eyes betrayed no real agreement. "But surely you've dreamed of more than this, Miss Brooks. Surely a woman of your intelligence has imagined a life beyond grading slates and chasing runny-nosed children through recess." Emma wanted to refuse immediately, to throw the papers back in his face, but something made her hesitate. Not desire for the position itself, but suspicion. "Why me?" she asked carefully. "Why now?" Victor's smile flickered just barely before returning to its practiced ease. "Talent doesn't go unnoticed forever, Miss Brooks." "That's not an answer." "Consider it an opportunity," Victor said, sidestepping her question entirely. "One that expires rather quickly. The Academy needs an answer within the week." "A week?" Emma repeated skeptically. "That's awfully convenient timing, isn't it? Right after Samuel Carter rode into town with warnings about your business practices." Victor's expression hardened almost imperceptibly, the mask slipping just enough for Emma to glimpse something colder underneath. "Mr. Carter's opinions of me are hardly relevant to your career, Miss Brooks." "Aren't they?" Emma pressed. "Seems awfully suspicious that you'd offer me a life-changing opportunity in Chicago right when Samuel's trying to expose whatever it is you're planning for this valley." "You wound me with such suspicion," Victor said, though his tone had lost its earlier warmth. "I'm simply a businessman recognizing talent and offering opportunity. What you choose to believe about my character is entirely your own prerogative." He closed the portfolio, sliding it across her desk. "Review the documents at your leisure. But do remember, Miss Brooks, opportunities like this rarely present themselves twice. And men like Samuel Carter, with his violent history and reckless heroics, rarely offer women stability worth staying for." The comment struck exactly where Victor intended, and Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks, despite her attempt to remain composed. "Samuel Carter is twice the man you'll ever be," she said sharply. Victor's smile returned cold and knowing. "We'll see about that, Miss Brooks. We'll see." He left without another word, leaving Emma standing alone with the portfolio, her hands trembling with a mixture of anger and unwelcome uncertainty. That evening, alone in her small house at the edge of town, Emma opened the portfolio again, studying the documents more carefully. The offer was genuine, she realized with growing unease, the letterhead legitimate, the salary figure staggering compared to her current modest wages. Everything about it seemed real, which made it all the more unsettling. Why would a man like Victor Ashford, clearly working to manipulate an entire town into selling their land, take time to arrange a genuine, prestigious career opportunity for her specifically, unless removing her from Pine Hollow served some purpose beyond simple kindness? She was still puzzling over the documents when a knock sounded at her door. Opening it, she found Reverend Whitfield standing there, his expression grave. "Emma, I need to speak with you. It's important." "Of course, come in." The Reverend stepped inside, glancing around nervously before speaking. "I received a letter today from an old colleague in Wyoming. Seems your friend Samuel Carter's reputation is being discussed rather extensively among certain circles." Emma's chest tightened. "What kind of discussion?" "Formal charges," Reverend Whitfield said gravely. "Someone's filed papers accusing Samuel of murder related to that gunfight he mentioned years back. My colleague says a federal marshal's already been dispatched to investigate." "That's impossible," Emma said, though dread flooded through her. "Samuel said that was self-defense resolved years ago." "Perhaps it was," Whitfield said carefully. "But someone with considerable influence is stirring old ashes, Emma. And I think we both know exactly who benefits from Samuel Carter being labeled a murderer rather than a hero." Emma's blood ran cold as the pieces clicked into place. Victor Ashford's offer, the sudden resurrection of old charges against Samuel, the timing of it all, none of it was coincidence. "He's trying to destroy Samuel," she whispered, "and get me out of town at the same time." "It certainly appears that way," Whitfield agreed. "Emma, I think you need to consider very carefully what's happening here. This isn't simply about railroad expansion or land purchases anymore. This is calculated, deliberate destruction of anyone who stands against Victor Ashford's plans." Emma's mind raced fear for Samuel, overwhelming every other consideration. "I have to warn him." "How?" Whitfield asked. "He's already on his way back to Wyoming, likely walking straight into whatever trap's been set for him there." Panic clawed at Emma's chest. If federal marshals were already investigating if formal murder charges had been filed, Samuel could be arrested, imprisoned, or worse, the moment he arrived home. "I need to send word ahead," she said urgently. "Warn him before he walks into an ambush." "I'll help however I can," Whitfield offered. "But Emma, you should also consider your own safety. If Ashford's willing to manufacture murder charges against Samuel, there's no telling what lengths he'll go to ensure you accept his offer and leave town." That night, Emma composed a desperate telegram to send at first light, praying it would reach Samuel before disaster struck. But even as she worked, a nagging fear gripped her. Telegrams could be intercepted. Messages could be delayed deliberately or otherwise by men with enough money and influence. She barely slept again, tossing through nightmares of Samuel in shackles of federal marshals, dragging him away, while she stood helpless, unable to reach him in time. Morning brought little relief. She rushed to send her telegram only to be informed by the flustered telegraph operator that lines to Wyoming had mysteriously gone down overnight, delaying all outgoing messages by at least 2 days. 2 days? Emma repeated numbly. "That's not a coincidence, is it?" The operator, a nervous young man named Charlie, glanced around before lowering his voice. "Mr. Ashford's man came through yesterday evening, paid handsomely to expedite some business correspondence of his own. Don't rightly know if that's connected, ma'am, but seemed mighty suspicious timing to me." Emma's fists clenched with helpless fury. Victor Ashford was systematically isolating Samuel, ensuring no warning could reach him before whatever trap awaited his return to Wyoming. She spent the following days in an agony of uncertainty, teaching her classes with distracted efficiency, while her mind remained fixed on Samuel's safety. Rumors continued swirling through Pine Hollow. Some townspeople now openly questioning Samuel's character based on whispers about the murder charges, while others, particularly those who'd witnessed his heroism during the barn fire, staunchly defended him. The town was fracturing exactly as Victor Ashford intended. 5 days after Samuel's departure, Emma finally received a response to her delayed telegram, though it brought no comfort. The message was brief, sent not from Samuel, but from an unfamiliar name, identifying himself as Deputy Marshal Wilson. Samuel Carter apprehended upon arrival. Murder charges pending investigation. Trial date to be determined. Emma's knees buckled, and she sank into a chair, the telegram crumpling in her trembling hands. They'd taken him. Victor Ashford's manufactured charges had succeeded, and Samuel was now imprisoned awaiting trial for a crime that had already been resolved years earlier as legitimate self-defense. "I have to go to him," she said aloud, though no one was there to hear her. She spent that entire night planning, calculating the journey to Wyoming, the resources she'd need, the arrangements required for her extended absence from teaching duties. By morning, she'd made her decision. She would travel to Wyoming herself, find whatever evidence existed proving Samuel's innocence, and ensure justice prevailed against Victor Ashford's manipulation. But first, she needed allies. She sought out Reverend Whitfield again, finding him in his small study, preparing for Sunday's sermon. "Samuel's been arrested," she said without preamble. "Ashford's charges worked. I'm going to Wyoming to help him." Whitfield's expression turned grave. "Emma, that's an incredibly dangerous journey for a woman traveling alone, especially considering the powerful enemies you'd be confronting." "I don't care about the danger," Emma said firmly. "Samuel needs help, and I refuse to sit here helplessly while Victor Ashford destroys an innocent man's life." "Then you won't go alone," a new voice interjected. Emma turned to find Jacob Hendricks standing in the doorway, still bearing faint burn marks from the fire Samuel had saved him from. "Jacob, this isn't your fight." "The hell it isn't," Jacob said fiercely. "That man saved my life, Emma. Nearly died doing it. I'll be damned if I sit here comfortable while he rots in some Wyoming jail cell because of lies." "I'm coming too," Sarah Hendricks added, appearing behind her husband. "Someone needs to keep you both from doing anything reckless." Emma felt tears prick her eyes at the unexpected show of support. "Thank you, both of you. But this is dangerous. Ashford's already proven he'll manipulate the law itself to achieve his goals." "Which is exactly why you need allies," Reverend Whitfield said, surprising her by rising from his desk. "I'm coming as well. I have connections to a lawyer in Cheyenne who specializes in cases involving corrupt business practices. If Ashford's manufactured evidence against Samuel, we'll need proper legal representation to expose it." Within 2 days, the small group had organized their journey, pooling resources, and arranging for temporary coverage of their respective responsibilities in Pine Hollow. As they prepared to depart, Emma received an unexpected visitor. Victor Ashford himself appeared at her door, his expression carefully arranged into false concern. "I heard about Mr. Carter's unfortunate legal troubles," he said smoothly. "Terrible business murder charges. I do hope you're not foolishly considering involving yourself in such a dangerous situation." "Your concern is touching," Emma said icily, "though I suspect it's about as genuine as your railroad expansion promises." Victor's smile tightened. "I merely wish to remind you of the academy opportunity still awaiting your response. Perhaps this unfortunate development with Mr. Carter should influence your decision. A man with such violent tendencies facing serious criminal charges hardly seems like someone worth sacrificing a prestigious career for." "Get off my property," Emma said, her voice deadly calm despite the fury boiling beneath her composed exterior. "I'm simply offering practical advice," Victor continued, undeterred. "But do consider, Miss Brooks, that continued association with Mr. Carter during his current difficulties might reflect poorly on your own reputation. Chicago society values propriety above all else." "I said get off my property," Emma repeated, stepping forward with such fierce determination that Victor actually retreated slightly. "Very well," he said, straightening his jacket with exaggerated dignity. "But remember, opportunities don't wait forever. Neither does patience." As his carriage disappeared down the road, Emma felt more certain than ever that Victor Ashford was directly responsible for Samuel's arrest, though proving it remained an entirely different challenge. The journey to Wyoming took nearly a week, grueling days of travel across difficult terrain, tension building with each passing mile, as Emma's fear for Samuel's safety intensified. When they finally arrived in the small Wyoming town nearest Samuel's ranch, they discovered the situation was even more dire than the telegram had suggested. "Trial's set for next week," the local sheriff informed them gruffly. "Federal marshals building a case based on witness testimony from the original incident, along with some new evidence that's recently surfaced." "New evidence?" Emma pressed. "What kind of new evidence?" "Alleged eyewitness who claims Carter drew first unprovoked," the sheriff said. Convenient how this witness suddenly remembered crucial details 3 years after the fact, right when someone started asking uncomfortable questions about railroad land purchases. The sheriff's skepticism gave Emma hope, though the situation remained precarious. "Can we see him?" she asked. "Samuel, I mean. Can we visit him?" The sheriff studied her for a long moment before nodding. "Reckon that'd be all right. Follow me." The jail was small, containing only 2 cells, one currently occupied by Samuel, who looked up in stunned disbelief as Emma approached. "Emma!" he breathed, rising immediately and gripping the bars separating them. "What in God's name are you doing here? This is exactly the kind of danger I wanted to keep you away from. Did you really think I'd stay in Pine Hollow while you rotted in a jail cell for crimes you didn't commit?" Emma retorted, though relief at seeing him alive nearly overwhelmed her composure. "Emma, this is serious," Samuel said urgently. "Ashford's not just trying to ruin my reputation anymore, he's trying to see me hanged for murder." "I know," Emma said grimly, "which is exactly why we're here to help prove your innocence." Samuel's eyes moved past her to Reverend Whitfield and the Hendrickses. "All of you came. This is madness. You're risking your own safety by associating with me right now." "We're risking nothing compared to what you're facing," Jacob said firmly. "You saved my life, Samuel. I intend to return the favor." Reverend Whitfield stepped forward. "I've already contacted a lawyer colleague in Cheyenne, an expert in exposing fraudulent business practices. If Ashford's manufactured this new witness testimony, we'll find the proof." Hope flickered in Samuel's exhausted eyes, though wariness remained. "This witness, a man named Thomas Riggs, he's claiming I drew first that night, but that's simply not true. I have scars proving otherwise defensive wounds that couldn't have occurred if I'd been the aggressor." "Then we need to find Thomas Riggs," Emma said determinedly, "and discover exactly what connection he has to Victor Ashford." Over the following days, their small group worked tirelessly interviewing townspeople who remembered the original incident, tracking down Thomas Riggs's background, and slowly uncovering a web of financial connections leading directly back to Ashford's business empire. Their investigation revealed that Riggs had recently received a substantial payment disguised as a business loan from a company secretly owned by Victor Ashford himself. The timing coincided precisely with Riggs suddenly remembering crucial details implicating Samuel in the shooting. "This is exactly what we need," Reverend Whitfield said triumphantly, examining the financial documents their investigation had uncovered. Clear evidence of witness tampering directly traceable to Ashford's companies. But their celebration was short-lived. That evening, as Emma walked back to her rented room after another exhausting day of investigation, she was intercepted by 2 rough-looking men blocking her path. "Miss Brooks," one of them sneered, "Mr. Ashford sends his regards along with a friendly warning. Perhaps it's time you and your friends return to Pine Hollow before this investigation of yours leads to unfortunate accidents." Fear spiked through Emma, though she refused to show weakness. "Are you threatening me?" "Just offering some friendly advice," the second man said menacingly. "Wyoming can be a dangerous place for outsiders poking their noses where they don't belong." Before Emma could respond, a third voice interrupted, sharp and commanding. "Get away from her now!" Jacob Hendricks emerged from the shadows, shotgun raised threateningly, his expression fierce despite his still healing burns. The 2 men exchanged uneasy glances before retreating, though not without a final warning. "This isn't over. Tell Carter his luck's about to run out permanently." Once they'd disappeared, Jacob lowered his weapon, turning to Emma with concern. "You all right?" "I'm fine," Emma said, though her hands trembled slightly. "Thank you, Jacob." "This confirms it," Jacob said grimly. "Ashford's getting desperate, which means we're getting close to something that actually threatens him." The next morning, armed with their evidence against Riggs, they met with the lawyer. Reverend Whitfield had contacted a sharp, determined woman named Charlotte Reeves, who specialized in exposing corporate corruption. "This is excellent work," Charlotte said, reviewing their documentation. "Clear evidence of witness tampering and financial manipulation. This should be more than sufficient to have the charges against Mr. Carter dismissed, possibly even opening investigation into Ashford's broader criminal activities." Relief flooded through Emma, though it proved premature. That afternoon, as they prepared to present their evidence to the federal marshal overseeing the case, disaster struck. The marshal's office was in chaos when they arrived, deputies rushing about with grim expressions. "What's happened?" Emma asked one of the deputies. "Thomas Riggs is dead," the deputy said grimly. "Found this morning, apparent suicide, though something about the scene doesn't sit right with me." Emma's blood ran cold. "Suicide. He was our key witness proving Ashford's manipulation. Convenient timing, isn't it?" Charlotte Reeves said darkly, arriving beside them. "Dead men can't recant false testimony, and dead men certainly can't be cross-examined about mysterious financial transactions. Their crucial evidence against Riggs suddenly became far less useful without the man himself available to confirm the truth under oath. Victor Ashford, it seemed, was willing to commit murder to protect his schemes. This changes everything," Samuel said grimly when they informed him of the development during their next jail visit. "If Ashford's willing to kill to protect this operation, none of you are safe continuing this investigation." "We're not stopping now," Emma said fiercely. "Not when we're this close to exposing him." "Emma, listen to me," Samuel said urgently, gripping her hands through the jail bars. "I won't have you risking your life for this. If Ashford's already killed once to silence witnesses, he won't hesitate to eliminate anyone else threatening his plans. And I won't abandon you to hang for a crime you didn't commit," Emma shot back. "We're finding another way to prove your innocence, Samuel, whether you like it or not." Their standoff was interrupted by Charlotte Reeves rushing, in her expression a mixture of urgency and cautious optimism. "I might have found something," she announced. "While investigating Riggs's death, I discovered he wasn't the only person Ashford paid for false testimony. There's another witness, someone who actually saw the original shooting and has remained silent out of fear." "Who?" Samuel asked immediately. "A woman named Mary Coleman," Charlotte said. "She worked at the saloon where the shooting occurred. According to my sources, she witnessed everything and has been terrified to come forward, given Ashford's reach and resources." "We need to find her," Emma said. "Convince her that testifying is safe, that will protect her from Ashford's retaliation." Locating Mary Coleman proved challenging, as the woman had moved several times over the past 3 years, clearly attempting to distance herself from any connection to the original incident. When they finally found her working quietly at a boarding house in a neighboring town, she was understandably terrified to discuss what she'd witnessed. "I can't testify," Mary said, fear evident in her trembling voice. "Ashford's men made it very clear what happens to people who talk." "We can protect you," Emma promised, though she wasn't entirely certain how they'd accomplish that given Ashford's demonstrated willingness toward violence. "You can't protect me from a man with unlimited money and no conscience," Mary said bitterly. "Look what happened to Riggs. He tried playing both sides, taking Ashford's money, while also planning to eventually tell the truth. Now he's dead." "Please," Emma implored. "An innocent man's life hangs in the balance. Samuel Carter defended himself that night, didn't he?" "You saw the truth." Mary's expression wavered, guilt clearly warring with fear. "He did defend himself. That other man, the one who died, he drew first. Attacked Carter without provocation. I've carried that truth for 3 years, terrified to speak it." "Then speak it now," Emma pressed gently. "Save an innocent man's life and help expose the corruption threatening to destroy entire communities." After agonizing consideration, Mary finally nodded, tears streaming down her face. "All right, I'll testify. But you need to promise me protection. Real protection, not just words." Charlotte Reeves stepped forward decisively. "I'll arrange federal marshal protection immediately. Given Riggs's suspicious death, they'll take witness safety far more seriously this time." With Mary Coleman's testimony secured, hope returned to their exhausted group as they prepared for Samuel's upcoming trial. But Victor Ashford, sensing his carefully constructed scheme unraveling, was far from finished. 2 days before the trial, Emma received an urgent message summoning her to meet privately with Ashford himself at his temporary residence in town. Against Samuel's vehement objections, she decided to attend, curious what desperate maneuver he might attempt next. "Miss Brooks." Victor greeted her coldly upon her arrival, all pretense of charm now abandoned. "I must say your persistence has proven remarkably inconvenient." "Justice tends to be inconvenient for men like you," Emma replied evenly. "Let's dispense with moral posturing," Victor said sharply. "I know about Mary Coleman's testimony. I know about your evidence regarding Riggs's payments. You've assembled quite the case against my interests." "Then you know Samuel will be exonerated," Emma said. "Your schemes are collapsing, Mr. Ashford." Victor's expression turned dangerously calm. "Perhaps, but consider carefully what continuing this crusade will cost you personally. I have considerable resources." "Miss Brooks, resources capable of destroying not just Samuel Carter, but everyone associated with him. Your teaching position in Pine Hollow gone. The Hendrickses' ranch seized through manufactured debts. Reverend Whitfield's church condemned through fabricated safety violations. You're threatening innocent people," Emma said, horror creeping into her voice. "I'm demonstrating consequences," Victor corrected. "Withdraw your support for Carter's defense, convince Mary Coleman to recant her testimony, and I'll ensure everyone's lives return to peaceful normalcy. Refuse, and I'll systematically destroy everything and everyone you care about." Emma's mind raced, torn between fear for her friend's welfare and unwavering commitment to justice. "You won't win," she finally said, though uncertainty colored her voice. "Eventually someone will stop you." "Perhaps," Victor said, unmoved. "But that someone won't be a schoolteacher and a handful of ranchers from an insignificant frontier town. Choose wisely, Miss Brooks. Lives depend on your decision." Emma left the meeting shaken, torn between competing loyalties and genuine fear for everyone she loved. That evening she confided in Samuel during her jail visit, watching his expression darken with each word. "He's threatening everyone," Samuel said grimly. "This is exactly the kind of ruthless intimidation that destroyed ranchers back home." "What do we do?" Emma asked desperately. "If we continue, he'll destroy everyone's livelihoods. If we back down, you'll be convicted for a crime you didn't commit." Samuel was quiet for a long moment, his jaw tight with barely controlled anger. "We fight," he finally said. "Ashford's threats only prove how desperate he's become. If we back down now, he wins regardless of the trial's outcome. We need to expose him completely, not just save my own neck." "But the risk to everyone else is real," Samuel acknowledged. "But Emma, men like Ashford never stop with a single victory. If we surrender now, he'll simply find new targets, new towns to exploit, new lives to destroy. Someone has to stand against him eventually. Why not us? Why not now?" Emma studied his determined expression, finding renewed courage in his unwavering resolve. "You're right. We can't let fear dictate justice." Their conversation was interrupted by Charlotte Reeves rushing in breathless with urgent news. "I've found something crucial," she announced. "Documentation proving Ashford's entire railroad expansion scheme is fraudulent. He's not actually authorized by Continental Northern Railroad at all. He's been forging official documents using the railroad's reputation to manipulate towns into selling land at drastically undervalued prices, then reselling that land at massive profit once actual railroad surveys determine optimal routes. That's securities fraud," Samuel said, understanding dawning. "Federal crime far more serious than anything he's accused me of." "Exactly," Charlotte confirmed. If we can prove this in court alongside Mary Coleman's testimony exonerating you, we'll not only clear your name, but potentially bring federal charges against Ashford himself." Hope surged through their group, though Emma remained cautious, given Ashford's demonstrated capacity for ruthless retaliation. "We need this evidence secured immediately," Emma said, "before Ashford discovers we've uncovered his fraud and attempts to destroy the documentation." That night, as they worked frantically to organize their evidence for trial, Emma couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, a persistent unease that something dangerous loomed just beyond their perception. Her fears proved justified when in the early morning hours, fire erupted at the boarding house, where Charlotte Reeves had been storing their crucial documentation. "Fire!" Someone screamed, chaos erupting as guests fled the burning building. Emma rushed toward the flames in desperate panic, knowing their evidence, everything they'd worked so hard to gather, was trapped inside. "Emma, no!" Jacob grabbed her before she could enter the burning structure. "It's too dangerous." "The evidence!" Emma screamed. "Without it, Samuel has no defense." Through the chaos, Charlotte Reeves emerged, coughing violently, but clutching a leather satchel against her chest. "I got it," she gasped. "Managed to grab the documentation before the fire spread too far." Relief flooded through Emma, though the deliberate nature of the fire confirmed their worst fears. Ashford had discovered their evidence and attempted to destroy it, willing to risk innocent lives in his desperate attempt to protect his criminal empire. "This proves how dangerous he truly is," Samuel said grimly when informed of the incident during Emma's next visit. "He's willing to burn down an entire building full of innocent people just to eliminate evidence against him." "The trial's tomorrow," Emma reminded him, exhaustion and fear evident in her voice. "We need to ensure this evidence reaches the courtroom safely." "We'll station guards," Charlotte assured them. "Federal marshals aware of the fire incident, taking security far more seriously now." Despite their precautions, tension remained thick as the trial date arrived. Emma sat in the crowded courtroom, watching Samuel led in wearing shackles, his expression carefully composed, despite the weight of circumstances threatening to determine his fate. Victor Ashford sat confidently among the spectators, his composed exterior betraying nothing of the desperate criminal activities Emma knew lurked beneath his polished facade. The trial began with the prosecution presenting their case, relying heavily on testimony from witnesses who claimed to have heard rumors about Samuel's supposedly violent temperament, though notably absent was any mention of Thomas Riggs, whose convenient death had removed their strongest witness. When Charlotte Reeves rose for the defense, presenting Mary Coleman's testimony alongside evidence of Ashford's fraudulent railroad scheme, the courtroom erupted in stunned murmurs. "Objection!" Ashford's lawyer shouted repeatedly, though the judge, clearly intrigued by the mounting evidence, allowed the testimony to continue. Mary Coleman, though visibly nervous, delivered her account with unwavering clarity, describing exactly how the original altercation had unfolded 3 years earlier, confirming Samuel's claim of self-defense beyond reasonable doubt. The deceased drew his weapon first. Mary testified firmly. Mr. Carter had no choice but to defend himself. "I've carried this truth silently for 3 years, too frightened to speak, given threats made against my safety." The courtroom's attention shifted dramatically when Charlotte Reeves then presented documentation exposing Ashford's fraudulent railroad expansion scheme, methodically demonstrating how he'd forged official documents to manipulate towns across multiple territories into selling land under false pretenses. Victor Ashford's composed facade finally cracked as the evidence mounted against him, his lawyer objecting frantically while federal officials present in the courtroom began exchanging significant glances. "This is outrageous," Ashford finally exploded, rising from his seat. "Baseless accusations designed to distract from Carter's obvious guilt." "Sit down, Mr. Ashford," the judge commanded sternly, "or I'll have you removed from this courtroom." The trial continued for the remainder of the day, evidence steadily accumulating against both the original murder charges targeting Samuel and the much more significant fraud allegations against Victor Ashford himself. By evening, as the judge called for recess before final deliberations, Emma felt cautious optimism for the first time since Samuel's arrest. "We might actually win this," she said to Samuel during their brief evening visit. "Thanks to you," Samuel replied, gratitude evident in his exhausted expression. "You risked everything to prove my innocence, Emma. I don't know how I'll ever properly thank you." "You don't need to thank me," Emma said softly. "I couldn't let them destroy you, Samuel. Not after everything, not after finally getting you back." Their tender moment was interrupted by a federal marshal rushing into the room, urgency evident in his expression. "Miss Brooks, Mr. Carter, you need to know immediately. Victor Ashford's fled town, disappeared shortly after court recessed along with several associates." Emma's heart sank. "He's running?" "Appears so," the marshal confirmed. "Federal agents are already organizing pursuit given the substantial fraud charges now pending against him." "This isn't over," Samuel said grimly. "Ashford won't simply disappear quietly. Men like him don't surrender easily, especially when facing complete financial ruin and lengthy imprisonment." Emma's cautious optimism transformed into renewed anxiety, understanding that while the trial might soon exonerate Samuel, the larger threat posed by Victor Ashford remained dangerously unresolved. "What happens now?" she asked. "We wait for the verdict," Samuel said, "and pray that clearing my name is enough to keep everyone safe at least temporarily, until Ashford's properly apprehended." The following morning, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation as the judge prepared to deliver his verdict. Emma sat beside Reverend Whitfield and the Hendrickses, her hands clasped tightly together as she awaited news that would determine Samuel's entire future. "In light of overwhelming evidence presented," the judge began, "including credible eyewitness testimony directly contradicting the prosecution's narrative alongside disturbing evidence of witness tampering and fraudulent business practices perpetrated against this court and numerous communities, I hereby dismiss all charges against Samuel Carter." The courtroom erupted in a mixture of cheers and outraged protests, Emma's relief so overwhelming she nearly collapsed against Reverend Whitfield's supportive arm. "Furthermore," the judge continued, raising his voice above the commotion, "given the substantial evidence of securities fraud, witness tampering, and potential involvement in the suspicious death of witness Thomas Riggs, I'm issuing a federal warrant for the immediate arrest of Victor Ashford." As officials scrambled to organize Ashford's capture, Samuel was finally released from custody, rushing directly into Emma's waiting embrace. "It's over," she whispered against his chest, tears of relief streaming down her face. "You're free, Samuel." "Not entirely over," Samuel said, though hope finally colored his exhausted voice. "Ashford's still out there, still dangerous. But Emma, we proved the truth. We exposed him." Their celebration was short-lived, however, as a messenger arrived breathlessly with alarming news. "Mr. Carter, there's trouble at your ranch. Fire's been spotted and several ranch hands report seeing armed men in the area." Samuel's expression darkened instantly. "Ashford. He's retaliating," Emma said, dread flooding through her. "Attacking your ranch out of pure vindictiveness now that his schemes have collapsed." "I need to get there immediately," Samuel said urgently. "We're coming with you," Jacob declared firmly, and despite Samuel's protests, their entire group mounted horses and raced toward his ranch, uncertain what devastating scene awaited them. As they approached the property, smoke was visible rising against the horizon, and the sound of distant gunfire echoed ominously across the landscape, confirming their worst fears. Victor Ashford, cornered and desperate, had chosen violence as his final catastrophic response to losing everything he'd built through fraud and manipulation. Emma's heart pounded with terror as they raced toward the chaos, praying they weren't already too late to prevent tragedy from claiming everything Samuel had worked 20 years to build. The fight for Samuel's freedom had been won, but an even more dangerous battle was just beginning. The gunfire grew louder as they crested the final ridge, and what Emma saw below stole the breath from her lungs entirely. Flames consumed the western fence line, cattle scattering in terrified confusion, and 3 men on horseback were driving burning torches into dry brush with methodical, deliberate cruelty. This wasn't retaliation born of panic. This was calculated destruction. "There!" Jacob shouted, pointing toward the main barn, where two ranch hands were pinned down behind a water trough, exchanging gunfire with a fourth attacker positioned near the house. Samuel didn't hesitate. He spurred his horse forward, drawing the pistol Reverend Whitfield had insisted he carry since his release. "Samuel, wait!" Emma screamed, but he was already gone, thundering down the slope with a fury she'd never witnessed in him before. "Sarah, stay back with Emma," Jacob commanded, following Samuel's charge with his own weapon drawn. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs as she watched the men she loved ride directly into gunfire, every instinct screaming at her to do something, anything, besides sit helplessly on a ridge watching chaos unfold. "I'm not staying back," Emma said fiercely to Sarah. "Samuel needs someone who can help the wounded." "Emma, that's suicide." But Emma was already moving, driving her horse down the slope with reckless determination, ignoring every rational warning screaming through her mind. Below, Samuel had reached the barn, dismounting in one fluid motion and firing at the attacker pinning down his ranch hands. The man crumpled, dropping his weapon, while the two hands scrambled up, grabbing buckets to fight the spreading flames. "Carter!" a voice bellowed from near the burning fence line. "Should have stayed in that jail cell where you belonged." Samuel's eyes narrowed as he recognized the voice. Ashford's man, Dobbs. Emma arrived just as gunfire erupted again, forcing her to dive from her horse and take cover behind a stack of feed barrels, her hands trembling as she pressed herself against the rough wood. "You're finished, Dobbs," Samuel shouted back, reloading his weapon with practiced efficiency. "Ashford's exposed. Federal marshals are already hunting him down." "Ashford ain't the one who's gonna hang for this," Dobbs shouted, and Emma's blood ran cold at the venomous satisfaction in his voice. "He's already 3 states away, but he made sure to leave instructions. Burn everything you built, Carter. Make you suffer before whatever comes next." More gunshots rang out, and Emma watched in horror as one of Samuel's ranch hands, a young man barely out of his teens, cried out and fell, clutching his shoulder. "Danny!" Samuel shouted, but he was pinned down himself, unable to reach the wounded boy without exposing himself to Dobbs's gunfire. Emma's mind raced. She couldn't just hide behind barrels while people bled. Taking a steadying breath, she scanned her surroundings and spotted a coil of rope hanging near the barn entrance, along with several buckets still filled with water from the firefighting efforts. "Sarah," she called out, spotting her friend, finally arriving with Reverend Whitfield close behind. "I need you to create a distraction on the eastern side. Throw something, make noise, anything to draw their attention." "Emma, what are you planning?" "Just trust me." Sarah, despite clear reluctance, grabbed several loose stones and hurled them toward the eastern fence line, shouting loudly enough to draw attention. The distraction worked exactly long enough for Emma to sprint from her hiding spot, grab young Danny by his uninjured arm, and drag him toward relative safety behind the water trough where Samuel had originally taken cover. "You're insane," Danny groaned through gritted teeth as Emma applied pressure to his bleeding shoulder. "Probably," Emma agreed, tearing strips from her petticoat to fashion a makeshift bandage. "Now hold still." Samuel used the momentary chaos to advance, firing precisely and forcing Dobbs to retreat toward the tree line where his remaining accomplices were positioned. But their retreat wasn't panic, Emma realized with dawning horror. It was tactical. "They're regrouping!" Jacob shouted from his position near the barn. "This ain't over!" As if summoned by his words, a new sound reached them, the thunder of additional horses approaching from the northern ridge. Emma's heart sank, fearing reinforcements for Ashford's men, until she recognized the lead rider's unmistakable silhouette. "That's Sheriff Coombs," Reverend Whitfield shouted with relief. "From town." Word of the attack had reached Pine Hollow's neighboring settlements faster than anyone anticipated, and now nearly a dozen armed ranchers and lawmen thundered onto the property, quickly overwhelming Dobbs' remaining forces. Within minutes, the tide turned decisively. Dobbs and his accomplices, recognizing the hopeless odds now stacked against them, threw down their weapons in surrender, rather than face a suicidal last stand. "Get them cuffed." Sheriff Coombs ordered his deputies before turning to Samuel with grudging respect. "Heard about your trial, Carter. Federal marshals telegraphed ahead, said you might need backup out here given Ashford's desperation. Your timing couldn't have been better, Sheriff, Samuel said, though exhaustion and lingering adrenaline colored his voice. Where's Ashford now? Emma asked urgently, still tending to Danny's wound. Marshals tracking him toward the Nebraska border. Coombs replied grimly. Man's got resources, though connections that stretch further than we initially realized. Might take considerable time to actually catch him. Emma's relief at their immediate victory was tempered by the unsettling knowledge that Victor Ashford remained free, likely already scheming his next desperate move. As the immediate crisis subsided, Samuel finally allowed himself a moment to survey the damage to his ranch. Burned fence lines, scattered cattle, one ranch hand, wounded though thankfully alive, and the acrid smell of smoke lingering over property he'd spent 15 years building with nothing but determination and sacrifice. He tried to destroy everything, Samuel said quietly, staring at the devastation with a complicated mixture of anger and exhaustion. Everything I built. But he didn't succeed, Emma said firmly, moving to stand beside him. You're still standing, Samuel. Your ranch survived. Ashford's schemes collapsed. You proved your innocence and exposed his corruption. Samuel turned to look at her, something raw and vulnerable flickering across his weathered features. I couldn't have done any of it without you, Emma. You risked everything, your reputation, your safety, everything to fight for me. Because you're worth fighting for, Emma said, simply reaching for his hand. Their tender moment was interrupted by Danny's pained groan as Reverend Whitfield helped him toward the house for proper medical attention. We should get him to a doctor, Emma said immediately, shifting into practical action. That wound needs proper cleaning and stitching beyond what I managed out here. There's a doctor in the next town over, Samuel confirmed. About an hour's ride. I'll take him myself. I'm coming too, Emma insisted. Over the following days, as Danny recovered and Samuel's ranch hands worked to repair the damage from the attack, an uneasy calm settled over the property. Federal marshals continued their pursuit of Victor Ashford, though updates remained frustratingly sparse, the man seemingly possessing an uncanny ability to evade capture despite mounting charges against him. Emma found herself increasingly drawn into ranch life, helping tend to Danny's recovery, assisting with meals for the exhausted ranch hands, and slowly discovering an unexpected sense of belonging in this rugged Wyoming landscape, so different from her comfortable existence in Pine Hollow. You're a natural at this, Samuel observed one evening, watching her efficiently organize supplies in the ranch house kitchen. Anyone would think you grew up on a ranch rather than teaching school children. I suppose adapting to necessity comes naturally, Emma replied, though warmth flooded her cheeks at his obvious admiration. Besides, someone needs to ensure you men don't starve while rebuilding everything Ashford tried to burn down. Samuel's expression grew serious. Emma, I need to ask you something important. Her heart skipped, sensing the shift in his tone. What is it? Pine Hollow needs you, Samuel said carefully. Those children depend on your teaching, and that community trusts your leadership. But Emma, I also need you more than I've ever needed anything in my entire life. Samuel, let me finish, he interrupted gently. I know I'm asking something difficult. This ranch, this life, it's demanding, sometimes dangerous, certainly not the comfortable existence Ashford offered you in Chicago. But I'm asking you to consider building a future here with me, once this danger with Ashford is finally resolved. Emma's breath caught 20 years of longing crystallizing into this single terrifying, wonderful moment. Are you asking me to marry you, Samuel Carter? I'm asking you to consider it, Samuel said, his voice raw with vulnerability. Not right this moment, not while Ashford remains free and dangerous, but eventually, when this nightmare finally ends. I want to build a real future with you, Emma. Not just recapture what we lost 20 years ago, but create something entirely new together. Tears welled in Emma's eyes as she cupped his face in her hands. Samuel, 20 years ago I fell in love with a boy who promised to return. But now, watching the man you've become, seeing your courage, your integrity, your willingness to fight for justice, even at tremendous personal risk, I've fallen in love with you all over again, completely and irrevocably. Is that a yes? Samuel asked, hope blazing in his exhausted eyes. That's an absolute yes. Emma confirmed, closing the distance between them for a kiss that sealed 20 years of separation, with promises of an entirely different future. Their joy, however, proved painfully short-lived. The following morning, a telegram arrived that shattered their fragile peace entirely. Emma read the message with growing horror before passing it to Samuel, her hands trembling uncontrollably. "Ashford's returned to Pine Hollow," she whispered. "He's gathered investors claiming the fraud charges are politically motivated slander from competitors. He's telling the town he intends to proceed with railroad development regardless of pending federal charges." Samuel's expression darkened dangerously. "He's targeting Pine Hollow directly now, probably out of pure vindictiveness since his Wyoming schemes collapsed entirely. There's more." Emma continued, her voice tight with dread. "He specifically named several ranching families who refused his initial offers, threatening legal action for obstruction of progress, claiming they're liable for delaying crucial railroad infrastructure." "That's absurd," Samuel said. "He has no legal authority to make such claims, especially with federal fraud charges pending against him. Try telling that to frightened ranchers facing potential lawsuits they can't afford to fight," Emma said grimly. "Samuel, he's using fear and legal intimidation now that his violent tactics failed here in Wyoming." Samuel's jaw tightened with fierce determination. "We need to return to Pine Hollow immediately. I won't let him destroy that community the same way he tried destroying mine." "But your ranch," Emma protested. "You just started rebuilding after the attack." "My ranch hands can manage repairs," Samuel said firmly. "This is more important. Pine Hollow's your home, Emma, and it's about to become mine as well. I refuse to let Ashford terrorize the people we love." Within hours, their group organized for immediate departure. Reverend Whitfield sending urgent telegrams ahead to warn Pine Hollow's residents about Ashford's continued deception, despite pending federal charges. The journey back felt interminable anxiety building with each passing mile as they contemplated what devastation might await them upon arrival. When they finally reached Pine Hollow, the atmosphere immediately confirmed their worst fears. The town square was crowded with anxious residents, voices raised in heated debate, as Victor Ashford stood upon a makeshift platform, his charismatic presence somehow undiminished despite his exposed corruption. Merely misunderstandings arising from business competitors seeking to eliminate legitimate competition, Ashford was proclaiming as they arrived. "I assure you, good people of Pine Hollow, these so-called federal charges will be resolved swiftly once proper investigation reveals the truth behind these malicious accusations." "He's lying through his teeth," Samuel muttered, dismounting quickly and pushing through the crowd with Emma close behind. "Samuel Carter," Ashford said smoothly upon spotting him, though something flickered dangerously behind his composed expression. "How wonderful that you've returned fresh from your recent legal troubles. Perhaps you'd care to share with these good people your own experience with malicious, unfounded accusations. The only malicious accusations here are the ones you've fabricated against innocent people." Samuel shot back, his voice carrying clearly across the assembled crowd. "This town needs to understand exactly who they're dealing with." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some clearly still skeptical, others emboldened by Samuel's confident challenge. "Federal marshals have issued a warrant for your arrest," Emma added forcefully, stepping forward beside Samuel. "Securities fraud, witness tampering, and potential involvement in a suspicious death. That's not misunderstanding, Mr. Ashford. That's criminal corruption." Ashford's composed facade cracked slightly, though he quickly recovered. "Baseless allegations, Miss Brooks, motivated entirely by personal bias given your romantic entanglement with Mr. Carter here." "The evidence speaks for itself," Charlotte Reeves interjected, having accompanied them back to Pine Hollow specifically for this confrontation. "Forged railroad authorization documents, fraudulent land valuation schemes designed to defraud entire communities, and financial records, proving payments made to manipulate witness testimony." The crowd's murmurs grew louder, uncertainty visibly shifting toward suspicion regarding Ashford's true intentions. "This is absurd," Ashford said, though desperation now colored his voice. "I've invested considerable resources developing opportunities for this community." Why would I risk everything through such reckless criminal behavior? Because greed makes men reckless, Reverend Whitfield said, his normally gentle voice hardening with righteous anger. You've manipulated, threatened, and possibly murdered innocent people, all to enrich yourself through fraudulent schemes. This community deserves the truth. Sensing the crowd's growing hostility, Ashford's expression shifted, revealing genuine desperation beneath his crumbling composure. You'll regret this, he hissed, no longer bothering with pretense. All of you. I still have resources connections that extend far beyond this insignificant little town. Not for much longer, a new voice announced firmly, and the crowd parted to reveal Deputy Marshal Wilson, accompanied by several armed federal agents, approaching with grim determination. Victor Ashford, Wilson announced formally. You're under arrest for securities fraud, witness tampering, and suspected involvement in the death of Thomas Riggs. Ashford's eyes darted frantically, seeking escape routes, but the marshals had strategically surrounded the platform, eliminating any possibility of flight. This isn't finished, Ashford snarled as deputies moved to restrain him. You think capturing me solves anything? My investors, my associates, they'll continue this work regardless of my personal circumstances. Perhaps, Marshal Wilson acknowledged coldly. But you'll be facing justice from behind federal prison bars rather than continuing your criminal enterprise. As deputies led Ashford away, the crowd erupted in a mixture of relief and lingering shock, townspeople slowly processing the magnitude of danger they'd narrowly avoided. It's finally over. Emma breathed relief, flooding through her exhausted body. Not entirely, Samuel cautioned, though hope finally colored his weathered expression. Ashford mentioned investors and associates. We should remain vigilant that his schemes might continue through other channels. Their momentary relief, however, provided space for the community to finally begin healing from the divisive tension Ashford's manipulation had created. Neighbors who'd been suspicious of each other, some tempted by Ashford's promises, others skeptical from the beginning, slowly began reconciling their differences, now that the truth had been definitively exposed. Over the following weeks, life in Pine Hollow gradually returned to normalcy, though profound changes had occurred beneath the surface. Samuel divided his time between managing repairs to his Wyoming ranch through trusted associates and spending increasing time in Pine Hollow, courting Emma properly for the first time in their complicated 20-year history. I never imagined courtship at my age would feel so wonderfully terrifying, Emma admitted one evening as they walked together along the familiar river where they'd carved their initials as children. I've been terrified since the moment I walked back into your classroom, Samuel confessed with a soft laugh. Facing down armed men felt considerably less intimidating than wondering whether you'd forgive 20 years of silence. I forgave you the moment you saved Jacob from that fire, Emma admitted, though I certainly made you work for that forgiveness afterward. Rightfully so, Samuel said, pulling her closer. I owed you far more than simple forgiveness, Emma. I owed you the truth, the courage to fight for what matters most, and hopefully, eventually, a lifetime making up for those 20 lost years. They paused beside the old cottonwood tree, their childhood initials still faintly visible, despite decades of weathering, a testament to promises made, and finally, painfully, gloriously fulfilled. Samuel, Emma said softly, what happens now? With your ranch in Wyoming, my teaching position here, we still have significant decisions ahead. Samuel's expression grew thoughtful. I've been considering that extensively. What if we built something entirely new? Not entirely my Wyoming ranch, not entirely your Pine Hollow schoolhouse, but a genuine partnership, combining both our strengths. What do you mean? I could establish a smaller ranching operation here near Pine Hollow, Samuel explained. Close enough that you could continue teaching while I manage cattle operations locally. My original ranch could remain under trusted management, providing continued income without requiring my constant physical presence. Emma's heart swelled at his willingness to compromise, to genuinely build a life together, rather than expecting her to sacrifice everything for his vision alone. I'd like that, she said softly. Building something new together, rather than simply returning to old patterns. Their tender moment was interrupted by young Tommy Riley running toward them, breathless with excitement. Miss Brooks, Mr. Carter, you need to come quick. Sheriff's got urgent news from the federal marshals. Emma's heart clenched with sudden apprehension. "What kind of news?" "Something about Ashford's trial," Tommy said. "Sheriff says it's real important, involves the whole town somehow." Exchanging worried glances, Emma and Samuel hurried toward town, uncertainty gnawing at their previously peaceful evening. They found Sheriff Coombs addressing a gathering crowd outside the general store, his expression carrying complicated emotions. "Folks, I've received official word from federal authorities," Coombs announced. "Victor Ashford's trial concluded this morning. Given overwhelming evidence presented, including testimony from numerous witnesses across multiple territories, he's been convicted on all charges." Relief swept through the assembled crowd, though Coombs continued with visible hesitation. "There's more," he said. "Investigation into Ashford's broader criminal network revealed something rather unexpected. Turns out several prominent citizens right here in Pine Hollow had been secretly cooperating with his schemes, providing information about vulnerable ranchers and families most likely to accept fraudulent offers." Shocked murmurs erupted through the crowd, suspicious glances exchanged as people wondered which neighbors might have betrayed their trust. "Who?" someone shouted from the crowd. "Who was helping him?" Sheriff Coombs' expression grew grave. "I'm not at liberty to name individuals until formal charges are filed, but I can confirm the investigation is ongoing and additional arrests may be forthcoming right here in our own community." Emma felt Samuel's hand tighten around hers, both of them sensing that despite Ashford's conviction, Pine Hollow's troubles weren't entirely resolved. "This isn't over," Samuel said quietly, echoing his earlier warning. "Ashford's conviction addressed his direct crimes. But if he had accomplices within this community itself, we're facing an entirely different kind of danger now." As the crowd dispersed, still processing this unsettling revelation, Emma couldn't shake a growing sense of unease, wondering which trusted faces in Pine Hollow might harbor secrets far more dangerous than anyone previously imagined. That night, as she prepared for bed in her small home, a soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Opening the door cautiously, she found Sarah Hendricks standing there, her expression tight with obvious distress. "Sarah, what's wrong?" "Emma," Sarah whispered, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "I need to tell you something. Something I should have confessed months ago, but I was too frightened." Emma's stomach tightened with dread. "What is it?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "It's about Jacob. About why Ashford specifically targeted our ranch with that fire, why he seemed to know exactly which families were most vulnerable to his schemes." "Sarah, what are you saying?" "Jacob's been in debt," Sarah confessed, her voice breaking. "Serious debt from gambling losses he kept hidden from me. Ashford discovered this weakness months before you even met Samuel again. He's been quietly manipulating us long before that barn fire, promising debt relief in exchange for information about other struggling families in town." Emma's world tilted dangerously as she absorbed this devastating revelation. "Sarah, are you telling me Jacob's been secretly working with Ashford this entire time?" Sarah's tears finally spilled over. "I didn't know how deep it went until recently. Jacob's terrified Emma. Terrified of what happens now that Ashford's exposed, terrified about what secrets might surface during ongoing investigations." The weight of this betrayal crashed over Emma with dizzying force. Jacob, the same man who'd stood fiercely beside Samuel throughout their entire ordeal, who'd risked his own life confronting Ashford's henchmen in Wyoming, had secretly been complicit in the very schemes threatening to destroy their community. "Why are you telling me this now?" Emma asked, struggling to process the devastating implications. "Because Jacob's planning to run," Sarah whispered desperately. "Tonight, he's terrified federal investigators will discover his involvement, and he's convinced fleeing is his only option. Emma, please, I don't know what to do. I love my husband, but I can't condone what he's done, and I'm terrified of what happens to our family if he disappears." Emma's mind raced through the implications, understanding immediately that Jacob's flight would only confirm suspicions and potentially implicate innocent Sarah alongside him. "We need to find Samuel," Emma said urgently, "and Sheriff Coombs. If Jacob runs now, it'll look like an admission of guilt, potentially far worse than his actual involvement warrants." "Please," Sarah begged, "please help us find another way. Jacob made terrible mistakes, But he's not truly a bad man, just a desperate one who made devastating choices trying to protect our family's finances. Emma felt the crushing weight of impossible choices pressing down upon her. Loyalty to friends who'd stood beside them throughout their entire ordeal versus the undeniable truth that Jacob's secret complicity had potentially endangered countless innocent families throughout Pine Hollow. "I'll help however I can," Emma finally said. "But Sarah Jacob needs to face this honestly. Running will only make everything worse both for him and for your entire family's future." As Sarah nodded through her tears, disappearing into the night to find her husband. Before he made an irreversible mistake, Emma stood alone in her doorway, staring up at stars that suddenly seemed far less comforting than they had just hours earlier. The battle against Victor Ashford's corruption had claimed a devastating victory in the courtroom, but its aftermath revealed betrayal far closer to home than Emma had ever imagined possible, threatening to fracture the very community she'd sacrificed everything to protect. Emma barely slept that night, Sarah's confession echoing through her mind like a bell that refused to stop ringing. By dawn, she'd made her decision. Running to Samuel's cabin at the edge of town, she pounded on his door until he answered, hair-disheveled alarm evident in his sleepy expression. "Emma, what's wrong?" "Jacob," she said breathlessly. "He's been working with Ashford. Sarah told me everything last night. He's planning to run." Samuel's face hardened instantly, sleep vanishing from his features. "Where is he now?" "I don't know. Sarah went to find him, but that was hours ago." Samuel grabbed his jacket, already moving. "We need to find Sheriff Coombs before Jacob does something that can't be undone." They found the sheriff at his office, already awake and reviewing paperwork related to Ashford's expanding investigation. "Sheriff, we need to talk," Samuel said urgently. "It's about Jacob Hendricks." Coombs looked up sharply. "What about him?" "He's been feeding information to Ashford." Emma said the words, tasting bitter even as she spoke them. About vulnerable families, financial weaknesses, anything Ashford could exploit. Coombs' expression darkened. "That would explain some inconsistencies we've found in the investigation. Federal agents mentioned an unidentified local informant, someone with intimate knowledge of the community's financial situations. He's planning to flee," Samuel added. "Tonight, possibly already gone." Coombs stood, immediately reaching for his hat. "Then we need to move fast. If he runs, it confirms guilt regardless of actual involvement, and it drags Sarah and their children into consequences they don't deserve." The three of them mounted horses and rode toward the Hendricks Ranch, urgency propelling them faster than caution typically allowed. When they arrived, they found Sarah standing alone in the yard, tears streaming down her face, wringing her hands with obvious anguish. "Sarah?" Emma called out, dismounting quickly. "Where's Jacob?" "He's gone," Sarah sobbed. "Packed a bag last night, said he was heading toward the territory border." "Emma, I tried to stop him. I swear I tried, but he wouldn't listen." "How long ago?" Coombs asked urgently. "Maybe 3 hours," Sarah said. "He took the fastest horse, said he had a head start planned for weeks in case something like this happened." Samuel's jaw tightened. 3 hours is a significant lead. Which direction exactly? "Toward Miller's Pass," Sarah said. "He mentioned once that it connects to territory outside federal jurisdiction, someplace he thought he could disappear." Coombs was already calculating routes, urgency evident in his weathered expression. "If he reaches the pass before we catch him, extraditing him back for prosecution becomes considerably more complicated." "I'm coming with you," Emma said immediately. "Emma, this could be dangerous," Samuel protested. "Jacob's desperate, and desperate men make unpredictable decisions." "He's not violent," Emma argued. "He's frightened, Samuel. There's a difference. Someone needs to talk sense into him, convince him that running only makes everything worse." Sarah stepped forward, her expression suddenly resolute despite her tears. "I'm coming too. He's my husband. If anyone can convince him to return and face this honestly, it's me." Coombs studied them both for a long moment before nodding reluctantly. "All right, but we move fast and you both listen to my instructions without question. This isn't some romantic pursuit. This is serious business with serious consequences." They rode hard toward Miller's Pass, the landscape growing increasingly rugged as they approached the territorial boundary. Emma's mind raced through everything she knew about Jacob, searching for understanding beneath her disappointment and hurt at his betrayal. He'd risked his life for Samuel in Wyoming. He'd stood fiercely against Ashford's henchman, shotgun raised without hesitation. How could that same man have been secretly feeding information that endangered countless families throughout Pine Hollow? "People aren't simple," Samuel said quietly, riding beside her as though sensing her internal struggle. Jacob's courage in Wyoming was genuine, Emma. So was his fear and desperation that led him toward Ashford originally. Both truths can exist simultaneously in the same man. "How do you reconcile that?" Emma asked. "How do you forgive someone capable of such contradictory actions?" "You don't necessarily forgive immediately," Samuel said. "But you try understanding the complete picture before judging entirely based on singular actions, whether heroic or shameful." They finally spotted Jacob's horse near the base of Miller's Pass, tethered beside a small campfire, where the man himself sat hunched, staring into flames with obvious despair. "Jacob!" Sarah called out, dismounting quickly and rushing toward him. Jacob's head snapped up, alarm flooding his features as he recognized the approaching group. "Sarah? What are you doing here? And Sheriff Coombs, Carter, Miss Brooks, all of you." "We know Jacob," Sheriff Coombs said firmly, though not unkindly. "We know about your arrangement with Ashford." Jacob's face crumbled, shame and terror warring across his weathered features. "I never meant for anyone to get hurt. I swear it. I just needed money desperately, and Ashford offered—" "Save the explanations for now," Coombs interrupted gently. "Right now I need you to understand something crucial. Running makes everything worse, Jacob. It confirms guilt regardless of actual circumstances, and it drags your entire family into consequences they don't deserve." "They'll hang me," Jacob said desperately. "Or lock me away forever. Sarah and the children will lose everything." "Not necessarily," Coombs said. "Cooperation with ongoing investigation, honest testimony about exactly what information you provided and when that carries significant weight with federal prosecutors, especially considering your later actions defending Carter in Wyoming." Jacob's eyes darted toward Samuel, disbelief evident in his expression. "You'd testify on my behalf after everything, after learning I betrayed this entire community?" Samuel was quiet for a long moment, clearly wrestling with complicated emotions before finally speaking. "You stood beside me against armed men, Jacob," he said carefully. "Risked your own life without hesitation. That courage was genuine regardless of earlier mistakes. I won't pretend your actions with Ashford weren't serious, but I also won't pretend they erase everything else about your character." Tears streamed down Jacob's face as the weight of his choices finally crashed over him completely. "I don't deserve that kind of grace." "Probably not," Samuel agreed honestly. "But grace rarely depends on deserving it, Jacob. It depends on choosing to extend it anyway, hoping people can genuinely change and make amends for past mistakes." Sarah knelt beside her husband, taking his trembling hands in hers. "Come home, Jacob. Face this honestly. Our children need their father, not someone hiding in shame for the rest of his life." After a long, agonizing silence, Jacob finally nodded, defeat and relief mingling in his exhausted expression. "All right, I'll come back. I'll tell them everything." The journey back to Pine Hollow felt considerably different from their urgent pursuit tension, replaced by cautious hope that honesty might yet salvage something from this devastating situation. Jacob's cooperation with federal investigators over subsequent days proved instrumental in dismantling remaining pieces of Ashford's criminal network throughout the region. His detailed testimony about specific methods used to identify and manipulate vulnerable families provided crucial evidence, ultimately resulting in reduced charges, given his substantial cooperation and previous actions defending Samuel against Ashford's henchmen, the prosecutors recommending probation rather than imprisonment. Sheriff Coombs informed them nearly 2 weeks later. Provided Jacob continues full cooperation and makes restitution efforts within the community. Relief flooded through Emma at this news. Though she recognized rebuilding trust within Pine Hollow would require considerably more time and effort than simple legal resolution, The community's still healing, Reverend Whitfield observed during a quiet conversation with Emma and Samuel. Trust was fractured deeply by Ashford's manipulation and Jacob's revealed involvement, however understandable given his desperate circumstances, adds another layer of complicated emotions people need time processing. "What do we do?" Emma asked. "How do we help this community truly heal, not just survive the immediate crisis?" Samuel considered this thoughtfully. "Perhaps it's time for something symbolic, something that reminds everyone what genuine community actually means beyond suspicion and fear that Ashford's manipulation created." Over subsequent weeks, an idea gradually took shape, championed initially by Reverend Whitfield, but quickly embraced by the entire town. A community celebration combining harvest festivities with deliberate acknowledgement of everything Pine Hollow had endured and overcome together. "We're calling it Founders Renewal Day," Sarah Hendricks explained enthusiastically, her own healing process visible in her restored energy and determination. A chance to celebrate resilience, forgiveness, and community strength. Jacob, despite lingering shame, threw himself into preparation efforts with genuine dedication, helping repair fences damaged during Ashford's attacks, contributing labor toward rebuilding the church roof that had suffered storm damage months earlier, and quietly supporting other families still struggling financially from Ashford's manipulative schemes. "He's trying?" Sarah told Emma one afternoon while they worked together preparing decorations for the upcoming celebration. "Really trying to make amends not just for legal reasons, but because he genuinely regrets the pain his choices caused." "People can change," Emma acknowledged, "given genuine opportunity and consistent effort." As preparations continued, Emma found herself increasingly focused on her own future alongside Samuel. Their relationship deepening through shared commitment to rebuilding not just their own lives, but the entire community around them. "I've been thinking about our earlier conversation," Samuel said one evening as they walked together toward the schoolhouse, "about building something new together rather than simply returning to previous patterns." "What have you decided?" Emma asked. "I want to establish that smaller ranch near Pine Hollow we discussed," Samuel confirmed. "But I've also been considering something else, something that might benefit this entire community, not just our personal future." "What's that?" "Agricultural education," Samuel said, excitement building in his voice. "Teaching modern ranching techniques, proper land management, financial planning for agricultural operations. Skills that might have prevented some families from becoming vulnerable to men like Ashford in the first place." Emma's eyes widened with growing enthusiasm. "Samuel, that's brilliant. Combined with my teaching, we could create genuine educational opportunities, addressing both children's basic education and adult agricultural knowledge." "Exactly," Samuel confirmed. "Turning tragedy into genuine positive change for this entire community, not just personal recovery." Their shared vision energized both of them. Throughout the following weeks, plans gradually solidifying alongside preparations for the upcoming Founders Renewal celebration. Emma found herself increasingly hopeful about their future together, 20 years of separation finally giving way to genuine partnership built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and hard-won wisdom. However, complications arose from an unexpected direction merely days before the planned celebration. A telegram arrived addressed to Samuel, its contents immediately darkening his expression as he read through official federal correspondence. "What is it?" Emma asked, noticing his troubled reaction. "Ashford's lawyers are attempting an appeal," Samuel said grimly, claiming procedural errors during his trial, specifically questioning the validity of Mary Coleman's testimony given alleged coercion. "That's absurd," Emma said immediately. "Mary testified voluntarily, despite genuine fear for her safety." "I know that," Samuel said, "but Ashford's lawyers are apparently arguing that federal marshals' promise of witness protection constitutes coercion, potentially invalidating crucial testimony that secured his conviction." Emma's stomach twisted with renewed anxiety. If his appeal succeeds, he could walk free, Samuel confirmed grimly. Or at minimum secure a new trial forcing everyone through this entire ordeal again. Their momentary hope curdled into fresh apprehension as they contemplated the possibility of Ashford's release undermining everything they'd sacrificed to achieve justice and protect their community. "We need to speak with Charlotte Reeves," Emma said urgently. "She'll understand the legal implications better than either of us." They found Charlotte at the small office she'd established in Pine Hollow following the trial, her expression grave as she reviewed the same telegram Samuel had received. "This is concerning," Charlotte confirmed, though not necessarily as dire as it initially appears. "Witness protection assurances are standard legal procedure, not coercion. However, Ashford's lawyers are clearly grasping at any possible technicality given the overwhelming evidence against him." "What happens now?" Emma asked. "A federal appeals court will review the case," Charlotte explained. "Given the strength of evidence beyond just Mary's testimony, including documented financial fraud and witness tampering evidence, I doubt this appeal ultimately succeeds, but it will likely delay final resolution by several months at minimum." "Months," Samuel repeated, frustration evident in his voice. "More uncertainty, more anxiety for this community precisely when everyone's trying to move forward and heal." "Unfortunately, that's often how justice works," Charlotte said sympathetically. "Slowly, methodically, sometimes frustratingly delayed, despite overwhelming evidence supporting conviction." Despite this unwelcome complication, the community proceeded with plans for Founders Renewal Day, refusing to allow Ashford's continued legal maneuvering to overshadow their determination toward healing and celebration. The day itself arrived bright and clear, Pine Hollow's town square transformed with decorations, tables laden with community-contributed food, and an atmosphere of cautious optimism, despite lingering uncertainties about Ashford's pending appeal. Emma stood beside Samuel watching children play games organized by local families. Adults mingling with renewed warmth, despite months of suspicion and fear that had fractured their community's trust. "Look at them," Emma said softly, gesturing toward Jacob and Sarah, currently laughing together with several other families as they organized a friendly competition. "A few months ago, I couldn't have imagined this scene. People are remarkably resilient," Samuel observed, "when given genuine opportunity and community support toward healing." Reverend Whitfield approached them, his expression carrying quiet satisfaction as he surveyed the celebrating community. "This is precisely what I envisioned when we first proposed this celebration. Not simply marking survival, but genuinely celebrating renewed community bonds." As the celebration continued into evening, with musicians playing familiar tunes and community members sharing stories both painful and hopeful. About recent months, Samuel unexpectedly stood before the gathered crowd requesting everyone's attention. "Folks," he began, his voice carrying clearly across the town square. "I know this past year's been difficult for everyone. Trust was broken. Fear divided neighbors, and genuine tragedy touched several families throughout our community. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd, memories of recent hardships still fresh despite their celebratory gathering. But I've also witnessed something remarkable," Samuel continued. "I've watched this community come together despite fear, despite betrayal, despite every reason to fracture into suspicious isolation. Instead, you've chosen healing, chosen forgiveness, chosen rebuilding trust, even when it would have been easier to simply give up." Emma felt tears pricking her eyes as she listened to Samuel's heartfelt words, recognizing genuine transformation, not just within their own relationship, but throughout the entire community they now called home. "I'd like to announce something," Samuel continued, "that I hope contributes toward this community's continued healing and growth." Along with Miss Emma Brooks, he glanced toward her, warmth evident in his expression. "We're establishing an agricultural education program here in Pine Hollow, teaching modern ranching techniques, financial planning, and land management skills." Surprised murmurs rippled through the crowd, followed by growing enthusiasm as people processed the potential benefits. "This program," Samuel continued, "aims to ensure no family in this community ever again becomes vulnerable to manipulation from men like Victor Ashford, armed instead, with knowledge and skills protecting their livelihoods and futures." Applause erupted throughout the town square, genuine appreciation evident on faces that had endured tremendous hardship throughout recent months. Emma watched Samuel's expression, pride and determination radiating from him, as he accepted the community's grateful response. As the celebration wound down into evening, Emma found herself walking alongside Samuel toward their familiar cottonwood tree, the site of childhood promises now witnessing entirely new commitments toward shared future. Today was perfect, Emma said softly, leaning against Samuel's shoulder as they gazed up at emerging stars. Not entirely perfect, Samuel corrected gently. Ashford's appeal remains unresolved, and genuine healing takes considerably longer than a single celebration, regardless of how meaningful. True, Emma acknowledged, but perfect in the sense that it represents genuine progress, genuine hope despite ongoing challenges. Samuel turned to face her fully, something serious yet tender, evident in his expression. Emma, I've been carrying something with me since Wyoring, something I want to properly formalize, rather than simply implying through vague future planning. Emma's heart raced with sudden anticipation. Samuel. He knelt before her, producing a small ring from his jacket pocket, simple yet clearly crafted with careful attention. Emma Brooks. 20 years ago I made a promise beneath this very tree, uncertain whether I could ever fulfill it. Today, having fought alongside you against corruption, injustice, and genuine danger, I'm more certain than ever that you're the only person I want beside me for whatever remains of my life. Tears streamed freely down Emma's face as she absorbed the magnitude of this moment, 20 years of longing finally culminating in genuine, irrevocable commitment. Will you marry me, Emma? Not because of childhood promises or romantic nostalgia, but because I've witnessed your courage, your integrity, and your unwavering commitment to justice, and I want to build our future together starting now. Yes, Emma whispered, then louder. Yes, Samuel Carter, absolutely yes. As Samuel slipped the ring onto her trembling finger, distant sounds of celebration continued throughout Pine Hollow, unaware that beneath their ancient cottonwood tree, another promise had just been sealed. This one built not on childhood innocence, but on hard-won wisdom, genuine partnership, and unwavering commitment forged through shared adversity. Their joy, however, would soon face one final unexpected test, as complications from Ashford's appeal proved far more consequential than anyone initially anticipated, threatening to unravel everything they'd fought so desperately to achieve. The telegram arrived 3 days after their engagement, and Charlotte Reeves's face told Emma everything before a single word was spoken. The appeals court granted a hearing, Charlotte said grimly, spreading the documents across Samuel's kitchen table. Ashford's lawyers found a federal judge sympathetic to their procedural arguments. Worse, they've uncovered something we didn't anticipate. What kind of something? Samuel asked, his voice tight with controlled tension. Ashford's claiming he has evidence of his own, Charlotte said. A witness willing to testify that Mary Coleman was paid by our side to fabricate her testimony against him. Emma's stomach dropped. That's a lie. Mary testified because it was the truth, not because anyone paid her. I believe you, Charlotte said. But belief doesn't win appeals court hearings. If Ashford's witness proves credible, it could not only overturn his conviction, it could open all of you to charges of witness tampering yourselves. Samuel's fist clenched against the table. Who is this supposed witness? Charlotte hesitated before answering. A man named Elias Ford claims he overheard Mary Coleman discussing payment arrangements in a boarding house dining room weeks before the trial. I've never heard that name, Emma said, racking her memory desperately. Neither had I until yesterday, Charlotte admitted, which concerns me considerably. Ashford's resources apparently stretch further than his imprisonment suggested. He's orchestrating this from prison, Samuel said, disbelief and fury warring in his voice. Even behind bars, that man refuses to accept defeat. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later, forcing Emma and Samuel to postpone wedding planning entirely as they scrambled alongside Charlotte to counter this unexpected threat. Emma traveled personally to find Mary Coleman, discovering the woman living under an assumed name in a distant township, having relocated again out of continued fear. I don't understand. Mary said, panic flooding her expression when Emma explained the situation. "I told the truth." "Why would anyone claim I lied?" "Because Ashford needs to discredit you," Emma said gently. "It's the only path back to freedom he has left." "I can't go through another trial," Mary whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "The threats, the fear, I barely survived it the first time." "I understand your fear," Emma said, taking Mary's trembling hands in her own. "But if we don't fight, this Ashford walks free, and everything you sacrificed to tell the truth becomes meaningless." Mary was quiet for a long moment, before finally nodding, resolve slowly replacing her fear. "All right, I'll testify again. But Emma, I need real protection this time, not just promises." Emma nodded fiercely. "We'll ensure it. I promise you that." Meanwhile, Samuel and Charlotte worked to investigate Elias Ford, uncovering troubling connections almost immediately. He served time alongside one of Ashford's former associates. Charlotte reported reviewing prison records she'd obtained through federal contacts. Released just 2 months ago, coincidentally, right around when Ashford's appeal began taking shape. "So he's fabricating testimony in exchange for payment," Samuel said grimly. "Just like Thomas Riggs before him." "Exactly," Charlotte confirmed. "Though this time we need concrete proof before the hearing, not after tragedy strikes like it did with Riggs." Their investigation intensified over the following days, Samuel personally traveling to interview former inmates who'd known Ford during his incarceration, while Charlotte pursued financial records that might reveal payments connecting him to Ashford's remaining associates. The breakthrough came unexpectedly through Jacob Hendricks, whose continued cooperation with federal investigators had earned him unusual access to certain financial documentation. "I found something," Jacob announced, arriving breathlessly at Samuel's ranch with papers clutched in his hands. Bank records showing a transfer to Elias Ford's account 3 weeks ago from an account traced back to Ashford's remaining business partner. Samuel's eyes widened as he reviewed the documentation. "This proves he's being paid for false testimony." "There's more," Jacob continued. "The account holder man named Reginald Coswell, he was Ashford's silent partner in the original railroad fraud scheme. Never got directly implicated because Ashford took full responsibility during his own trial. Ashford's protecting his network even from prison," Emma said, understanding the depth of manipulation still occurring despite his incarceration. "Ensuring loyal associates remain free to continue funding his appeals and legal maneuvering." Armed with this crucial evidence, Charlotte prepared meticulously for the appeals hearing. Confidence gradually returning, despite the unexpected complications Ashford's continued scheming had created. This should be sufficient to discredit Ford's testimony entirely, Charlotte assured them the evening before the hearing. Combined with Mary's continued testimony and the original evidence proving Ashford's fraud, I believe we're well positioned to defeat this appeal decisively. Despite Charlotte's confidence, Emma found sleep elusive that night, anxiety about the following day's proceedings mingling with lingering uncertainty about their entire future together. "You should be resting," Samuel said softly, finding her sitting alone on his porch steps well past midnight, staring up at stars, offering no particular comfort. "I can't stop thinking about everything that could go wrong," Emma admitted. "What if the judge believes Ford despite our evidence? What if Ashford somehow manipulates his way back to freedom again?" Samuel sat beside her, wrapping a comforting arm around her shoulders. "Then we'll fight again, exactly like we've fought every obstacle Ashford's thrown at us throughout this entire ordeal. We've proven repeatedly that truth eventually overcomes deception, no matter how desperately men like him cling to manipulation." "I'm just so tired," Emma confessed. "Tired of fighting, tired of uncertainty, tired of wondering when we'll finally have genuine peace to build our future without this constant looming threat." "I know," Samuel said gently. "But Emma, look how far we've already come. 20 years of separation, a wrongful murder charge, exposed corruption, community healing from betrayal and division. We've overcome extraordinary obstacles together. This appeal, regardless of outcome, won't diminish everything we've already achieved." Emma leaned into his embrace, drawing strength from his unwavering confidence despite her own exhaustion. Promise me whatever happens tomorrow, we'll find a way through it together." "I promise," Samuel said firmly. 20 years ago, I made a promise I struggled desperately to keep. This time, Emma, I intend to prove that some promises, when built on genuine love and unwavering commitment, become unbreakable, regardless of whatever obstacles life presents. The following morning arrived with nervous anticipation permeating their entire group as they traveled toward the federal courthouse, where Ashford's appeal hearing would determine whether justice truly prevailed or corruption somehow triumphed despite overwhelming evidence. The courtroom felt considerably different from Samuel's original trial tension, thick as both sides prepared to present dramatically conflicting narratives regarding Mary Coleman's original testimony. Ashford himself appeared noticeably diminished from his previous confident demeanor, months of imprisonment having stripped away much of his polished charisma, though calculating intelligence remained clearly visible behind his eyes. "All rise," the bailiff announced as the judge entered, and Emma's heart pounded with anxious anticipation as proceedings formally began. Elias Ford took the stand first, his testimony carefully rehearsed, as he claimed to have overheard Mary Coleman discussing payment for false testimony months before the original trial. She said clearly, Ford testified, that she'd been promised substantial payment for saying whatever was needed to convict Mr. Ashford, regardless of actual truth. Charlotte rose for cross-examination, her expression calm despite the significant stakes riding on this confrontation. "Mr. Ford," she began, "could you explain your relationship with Reginald Coswell?" Ford's confident expression flickered slightly. "I don't know anyone by that name." "That's interesting," Charlotte said, producing documentation, "because bank records clearly show a payment of $2,000 transferred to your account exactly 3 weeks ago, originating from Mr. Coswell's business account." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom as Ford's composure crumbled visibly. That money was for unrelated business matters." "What business matters exactly?" Charlotte pressed relentlessly. "Perhaps testimony designed to discredit a key witness in a federal fraud case." "Objection!" Ashford's lawyer shouted, though the judge's expression had already shifted toward evident skepticism regarding Ford's credibility. "Overruled," the judge said firmly. "Witness will answer the question." Ford's eyes darted desperately around the courtroom, seeking escape from Charlotte's relentless questioning, finding none available. I need to speak with my lawyer before answering further questions." "No further questions," Charlotte said, allowing Ford's obvious guilt to speak volumes without additional prompting. As Ford was escorted from the witness stand, visible tension radiated throughout the courtroom, Ashford's expression tightening with barely contained fury at this dramatic collapse of his manufactured evidence. Mary Coleman testified next, her voice steadier than during the original trial, strengthened by determination not to allow Ashford's manipulation to succeed a second time. "Everything I testified originally was completely true," Mary stated firmly. "I witnessed Mr. Ashford's associate deliberately provoke violence, forcing Mr. Carter to defend himself. I received no payment whatsoever for my testimony, only threats against my safety that I overcame because justice mattered more than my own fear." Ashford's lawyer attempted several aggressive cross-examination tactics, but Mary's composed, unwavering responses only strengthened her credibility further with each passing question. By the time Charlotte presented additional evidence connecting Ford's fabricated testimony directly back to Ashford's continued criminal network, operating even from within prison, the outcome seemed increasingly certain despite earlier anxiety. "Your Honor," Charlotte concluded, "this appeal represents nothing more than Mr. Ashford's continued criminal manipulation orchestrated even from behind prison bars through remaining associates, willing to fabricate evidence and intimidate witnesses. The original conviction should stand, and I would respectfully suggest additional charges be considered regarding this attempted manipulation of judicial proceedings." The judge's deliberation felt interminable, though ultimately his ruling arrived with definitive clarity that flooded Emma with overwhelming relief. "Given clear evidence of witness tampering and fabricated testimony presented by the appellant," the judge announced, "this court denies the appeal entirely." Mr. Ashford's original conviction stands, and I'm additionally ordering investigation into potential new charges regarding this attempted manipulation of judicial proceedings. Ashford's expression collapsed entirely, his final desperate gambit having failed, catastrophically exposing yet another layer of his ongoing criminal manipulation even while imprisoned. As deputies led him away, his eyes locked briefly with Samuel's, something between hatred and grudging acknowledgement passing between them before he disappeared entirely from their lives. "It's finally over," Emma whispered, tears of overwhelming relief streaming down her face as Samuel pulled her into a fierce embrace. "Completely over," Samuel confirmed. "No more appeals, no more manipulation, no more looming threats hanging over our future." Their celebration, however, remained tempered by exhaustion from months of relentless struggle, genuine relief mingling with profound weariness at finally reaching definitive resolution. "Let's go home," Emma said softly. "Let's finally build the future we've been fighting so desperately to protect." The journey back to Pine Hollow felt entirely different from their previous anxious travels, genuine peace finally settling over their group as they contemplated futures no longer overshadowed by Ashford's corrupting influence. Over subsequent weeks, life in Pine Hollow gradually transformed into something Emma had scarcely dared imagining throughout her 20 years of lonely waiting. Samuel's agricultural education program launched successfully, drawing enthusiastic participation from ranching families eager to protect themselves against future manipulation through improved financial literacy and land management knowledge. Emma continued teaching her classroom, now supplemented by evening sessions, where adults learned alongside their children, the entire community embracing education as protection against future exploitation. Jacob Hendricks, having completed his probationary requirements through continued cooperation and genuine community service, gradually rebuilt trust through consistent, humble dedication toward making amends for his earlier mistakes. "Never thought I'd see the day," Sarah remarked one afternoon, watching her husband patiently teaching younger children proper cattle handling techniques as part of Samuel's educational program, when Jacob would become someone the community actually trusts again. "People can change," Emma reminded her, gently echoing words spoken months earlier, given genuine opportunity and consistent effort. As autumn approached, wedding preparations finally resumed with genuine excitement, rather than anxious uncertainty overshadowing their plans. Emma found herself surrounded by supportive friends, helping prepare everything from her dress to decorations for what promised to be Pine Hollow's most celebrated wedding in recent memory. "I still can't quite believe this is really happening," Emma confessed to Sarah one evening as they worked together on wedding preparations. "After 20 years of loneliness, after everything we've endured together these past months, it feels almost surreal that we're finally here." "You've earned this happiness," Sarah said firmly. "Both of you through extraordinary courage and unwavering commitment, despite every obstacle life threw at you." The wedding day itself arrived beneath perfect autumn skies. Pine Hollow's entire community gathering to witness the culmination of a promise made 20 years earlier beneath their beloved cottonwood tree. Emma stood beside that same ancient tree, their childhood initials still faintly visible, despite decades of weathering, wearing a simple yet elegant dress that reflected her genuine, unpretentious character rather than elaborate fashion. Samuel waited for her, his expression radiating pure joy and disbelief at finally reaching this long-awaited moment, 20 years of separation and months of extraordinary struggle, culminating in this singular, perfect celebration. "You look absolutely beautiful," he whispered as she approached, taking her hands in his. "You clean up rather nicely yourself," Emma replied softly. Genuine laughter mixing with emotional tears as Reverend Whitfield prepared to officiate their long-awaited union. "We are gathered here today," Whitfield began, his voice carrying warmly across the assembled community, "to witness something truly remarkable. Not simply a wedding between two people, but the culmination of extraordinary courage, unwavering faith, and a promise that survived 20 years of separation. Wrongful accusation, corrupt manipulation, and profound community upheaval. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathered crowd, everyone present having witnessed firsthand the extraordinary journey bringing Emma and Samuel to this celebratory moment. Samuel Carter and Emma Brooks. Whitfield continued. Please share the vows you've prepared for this momentous occasion. Samuel spoke first, his voice steady, despite obvious emotion coloring his words. Emma, 20 years ago, I promised a frightened little girl that I'd return worthy of her love. I spent those 20 years building strength, resources, and character, believing that's what would eventually prove my worthiness. But these past months taught me something far more important. It wasn't my ranch, my success, or my accumulated wealth that made me worthy of you. It was choosing courage over fear, truth over convenient deception, and unwavering commitment to justice, regardless of personal cost. I promise to continue choosing those same values every single day for whatever remains of our lives together. Tears streamed freely down Emma's face as she absorbed his heartfelt words. Community members throughout the crowd similarly moved by his genuine sincerity. Samuel. Emma began, her own voice trembling with profound emotion. I waited 20 years, not entirely certain why, beyond some persistent hope that our childhood promise meant something genuinely significant. These past months revealed exactly why that hope never fully disappeared. You didn't just return as promised, you returned as an entirely transformed man of extraordinary integrity, courage, and compassion. You fought not just for our love, but for justice, for community healing, and for protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. I promise to stand beside you, always fighting alongside you for whatever challenges our future might present. Grateful every single day that some promises truly do become stronger through the passage of time, rather than fading into forgotten childhood memory. As they exchanged ring symbols, finally solidifying 20 years of complicated history into genuine permanent commitment, the entire community erupted in joyful celebration, applause and cheers echoing across Pine Hollow's peaceful landscape. I now pronounce you husband and wife, Whitfield announced triumphantly. Samuel, you may kiss your bride. Their kiss, filled with 20 years of longing finally fulfilled, sealed not just their personal union, but represented the culmination of an entire community's journey from fear and manipulation toward genuine healing, trust, and hard-won hope. As celebrations continued throughout the evening, Emma found herself standing again beside their cottonwood tree now as Samuel's wife, rather than merely his childhood sweetheart, reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. Regretting anything? Samuel asked softly, joining her beside the tree that had witnessed both their childhood promise and now their fulfilled adult commitment. Not a single thing, Emma said firmly. Every hardship, every fear, every moment of uncertainty led us precisely here to this exact moment of genuine, well-earned happiness. What do you think our future holds? Samuel asked, genuine curiosity coloring his voice. Emma considered this question thoughtfully before answering. Continued growth, I imagine, building our agricultural education program further, watching Pine Hollow continue healing and strengthening against future manipulation. Perhaps eventually, children of our own, carrying forward the values we've fought so desperately to protect and instill throughout this community. Samuel smiled warmly, pulling her closer against him. That sounds like an absolutely perfect future, Mrs. Carter. Mrs. Carter? Emma repeated softly, testing the name with evident satisfaction. I rather like the sound of that. As evening settled comfortably over Pine Hollow, their community continuing celebrations well into the night, Emma reflected on the extraordinary transformation this past year had brought not just to her own life, but to the entire town she'd called home for over 2 decades. Victor Ashford's corruption had nearly destroyed everything, exploiting fear, financial desperation, and human weakness to nearly fracture their entire community beyond repair. Yet through courage, unwavering commitment to truth, and genuine willingness toward forgiveness and healing, Pine Hollow had emerged stronger, more united, and more resilient than ever before. Jacob and Sarah Hendricks, having weathered betrayal and genuine redemption, now stood among the community's most trusted and respected families, their journey toward earning back trust serving as powerful testament to genuine transformation's possibility. Mary Coleman, having overcome tremendous fear to testify truthfully, not once but twice had relocated permanently to Pine Hollow, finding genuine belonging within a community that valued her courage and integrity. Reverend Whitfield continued shepherding the community through ongoing healing, his wisdom and compassion, instrumental throughout their entire journey from division toward genuine unity. And Emma herself, having waited 20 years for a promise she'd nearly convinced herself was merely childhood fantasy, had discovered that genuine love, when built on unwavering courage, integrity, and shared commitment toward justice, could indeed overcome even the most extraordinary obstacles life presented. As she stood beside Samuel beneath their beloved cottonwood tree, surrounded by a community they'd both sacrificed tremendously to protect and heal, Emma understood with absolute certainty that some promises forged in childhood innocence but tested through adult adversity become not just fulfilled commitments, but the unbreakable foundation for an entire lifetime of genuine partnership, courage, and unwavering love. The wooden swing they hung together beneath that ancient tree the following spring, dedicated to future generations of Pine Hollow's children, stood as permanent testament to their extraordinary journey. A physical reminder that promises rooted in genuine honesty, sacrifice, and unwavering commitment don't merely survive the passage of time. They become stronger because of it. Samuel Carter and Emma Brooks had waited 20 years, endured wrongful accusation, corrupt manipulation, and community upheaval, and ultimately discovered that true love isn't measured by how quickly two hearts unite, but by whether those hearts remain faithful to courage, integrity, and hope, regardless of whatever obstacles time and circumstance present. Their promise made beneath an old cottonwood tree by two frightened children 20 years earlier had finally completely and permanently been fulfilled.